Chapter 4250. Angry voices drifted into Yi Qian's ears from time to time, causing Yi Qian's eyes to darken even more. These people had disagreements over whether to pursue or not. It was naturally good for her if they didn't pursue. The stars in the sky shone brightly, illuminating the night with a hazy, smoky haze. The visibility range was up to 10 meters. Yi Qian, who was lying on the ground, could no longer hear the footsteps. She gently exhaled a mouthful of foul air mixed with the smell of dirt and slowly stood up. In the end, these people gave up on pursuing because they still had to guard the outside and not let anyone in. They wanted to turn Cowville Town and Yenny City into isolated towns and cities. They wanted to eliminate all the government offices and NRPL militants in these two places. As for the Chinese peacekeepers who entered these two places, they didn't say what would happen. However, it was obvious from their pursuit of the Chinese peacekeepers that they were hostile to them. They were probably also targets for elimination. Why were these people so confident that they could turn a small town and a city into their territory? Where did they get the confidence to go against the government forces and the NRPL militant? After leaving the forest, Yi Qian's brain kept thinking. She memorized the map to Cowville Town, so even if she was thinking about other things, she knew where to go. It had been an hour since she covered Squad Leader Feng and He Wei's escape. Yi Qian relied on her excellent skills and sharpness as a sniper to tangle with 2 platoons of troops in the hot forest about 4 kilometers horizontally for an hour. An hour was enough for Squad Leader Feng and He Wei to arrive at the camp of the Chinese peacekeepers in Cowville Town. A truck sped out of the camp. The sentries had already opened the iron gate of the camp. The strong headlights illuminated the front like a sword splitting the night sky. There were a total of 15 armed peacekeepers in the truck. Squad Leader Feng and He Wei, who had returned to the camp 5 minutes ago, were also in the truck. They and the other 13 peacekeepers went to rescue the female Special Forces soldier who came to support. She'll be fine. Don't worry. Special Forces soldiers aren't that easy to kill. In the car, Squad Leader Feng gently patted He Wei, whose muscles were all tensed up. She'll be fine. She'll be safe. The young peacekeeping soldier held the steel gun, his jaw tight. Until now, he still regretted why he didn't stay. He should have stayed. I should stay with her. I shouldn't let her face it alone. Even if she's a Special Forces soldier, she still needs support. He Wei's voice was hoarse and heavy as he said, 2 people are better than 1, isn't it? No, not to her. Squad Leader Feng solemnly said, she's a reinforcement that our country's special forces have already arrived in Libya. It can be seen that she's extraordinary. Otherwise, it's impossible for a female soldier to come over. If we stay, we'll be a burden to a Special Forces soldier who's good at night and individual combat. Our abilities aren't enough to support her, and we can't keep up with her combat strength. Her words made He Wei clench his fists even tighter. So, they were the ones who had implicated her. Don't think too much. She said she'll get away. I believe she'll be able to get away. Squad Leader Feng, who was also deeply worried, patted the soldier's shoulder heavily. He didn't want to say it out loud as he didn't want to add more psychological pressure to the young soldier. Chapter 4251. 1 against 2 platoons. There was a pained look in Squad Leader Feng's eyes. Although it wasn't a legend that a Special Forces soldier could fight against a platoon or even a battalion of soldiers, they were still the elite of the elite Special Forces soldiers. That female Special Forces soldier, was she the elite of the elite? He hoped that she was. This way, she would definitely be safe and sound. She would definitely be able to meet up with the male Special Forces soldiers who were waiting for her and successfully rescue Commissioner Miao and the other 4 people who had fallen into the hands of the NRFL militant. The atmosphere in the vehicle was somewhat solemn. The 15 peacekeepers all had the same solemn expression. They could still faintly hear the sound of artillery fire from Jenny City. They did not know how their comrades in Jenny City were doing, nor did they know how the female soldier was doing. In the driver's seat, the transport soldier who was driving stared straight ahead. He gripped the steering wheel tightly as he stared at the road ahead. He drove steadily, but he could not go too fast. The road conditions were so bad that the Chinese engineers in charge of road construction were still repairing the road between Cowell Town and Yenny City. The road leading to the outside of Cowell Town was still being retested. The poor road conditions made it impossible for the truck to drive too fast. Fortunately, the transport soldiers sent were all excellent transport soldiers in the army. Although the road conditions were bad, they could still maintain a speed of more than 60 kilometers per hour. They were ordered to rescue the female soldiers who were surrounded by illegal Libyan militants. They were now racing against time. After driving for less than 20 minutes, about 18 kilometers, the car suddenly came to an emergency stop. Under the high beam, the two transport soldiers in the car sensed that something was wrong in front of them. The only road leading to the outside had been cut down not long ago. Even the leaves of the trees were still green. There was no one on either side, as if they were waiting for the car to move the fallen trees away. Behind the dense leaves, in the crisscrossing branches, a few pairs of eyes flashed with excitement as they stared at the approaching car. When the car suddenly stopped, the people hiding in the branches cursed in a low voice, expressing their dissatisfaction with the sudden stop of the car. The stopped cars turned off all their lights and then began to reverse. Under the dim starlight, the guys hiding in the branches saw the originally advancing car suddenly retreat. They were stunned for a moment and opened fire. Their main target was the car. They had been staring at the car and did not notice that before the car reversed, the people who were originally sitting in the car had already gotten out. They rolled and jumped forward, hiding on both sides of the dusty road. The car continued to retreat, and the illegal militants hiding in the branches rushed out. They ran with their guns and fired wildly. Gunshots rang out, and people kept rushing out from behind the branches. The Chinese peacekeepers hiding on both sides of the road defended themselves. Shit! Retreat! Retreat! They have an ambush! Retreat! The illegal militants who rushed out of the road rebels' cars did not expect there was an ambush on both sides. Of the armed militants were unprepared. Were translation instead, they translation translation, translation translation, translation translation, translation translation, translation, translation translation, translation. While Yanni City was being pillaged, Cowell Town was also being bombarded by gunfire. The only road leading from Cowell Town to the Libyan capital was also being bombarded by gunfire. The Chinese peacekeepers had come prepared and had received professional training. Although they were nervous when facing the illegal militants, they were quite calm and collected. Chapter 42-52. This was the first time the Chinese peacekeepers had engaged in a firefight with the illegal militants. It was also time to test the peacekeepers' ability on the battlefield. The gunshots in front made Yi Qian's footsteps quicken. Covered in smoke and blood, she was completely reflexive. When she heard the gunshots, she jumped to the side and finally crouched down to hide. The gunshots were very clear in front of her. It was no more than 500 meters away, and it was almost an hour and a half since squad leader Feng and He Wei left. She did some rough calculations. Could it be the Chinese peacekeepers and the illegal militants who were trying to take over Cowell Town and Yenny City? As the thought flashed through her mind, Yi Qian picked up her rifle and quickly moved forward. The possibility of the Chinese peacekeepers and the illegal militants exchanging fire was very high. 500 meters to 300 meters, 200 meters, 50 meters, 20 meters. Under the faint blue starlight, Yi Qian saw the firefight around the bend in front of her. She bent down and began to move stealthily like a cat moving at night. Even her footsteps were extremely light and did not touch a speck of dust. The exchange of fire between the two sides was not large. It was a sporadic exchange of fire and not a continuous firefight. The stealthy Yi Qian was already very close to the exchange of fire. She was so close that she could see the figures of people bending down. But she could not be sure that the people exchanging fire with these people were Chinese peacekeepers. Until the loudspeaker in front of her shouted, Yi Qian's eyes instantly lit up. The Chinese peacekeepers did not want to engage in a firefight with the illegal militants. This was an internal conflict in Libya, and the Chinese peacekeepers had no right to interfere. Now that they had encountered each other and the exchange of fire was sporadic, it could be seen that there was still a possibility of negotiation between the two sides. Negotiation first. If the exchange of fire could be stopped, then everyone would be happy. If the negotiation failed, then they would directly engage in a firefight. There were two paths in front of them. Either the negotiation succeeded or the negotiation failed. Yi Qian heard the loudspeaker in front of her announce their identity in English. The Type 95 automatic rifle in her hands was already silently aimed at the black figure in front of her. The bullets were already loaded and ready to engage in a firefight. There was no need for negotiation. The illegal militants wanted to take over Cowell Town and Yenny City. Everyone who stood in their way, including the Chinese peacekeepers, was also their target. As expected, the peacekeepers wanted to negotiate a peaceful solution, but the illegal militants directly used the bullets in their guns to show that they did not want a peaceful solution at all. Then it would be a firefight. The Chinese peacekeepers who had come to support Yi Qian had yet to open fire when Yi Qian, who had been waiting for the exchange of fire, opened fire first. They attacked from behind and caught the enemy off guard. This time, Yi Qian did not evade the assassins like she did in the forest. Instead, she locked onto her target and fired continuously. She did not aim for other positions either. Her bullets went straight for the target's head. One bullet for one target. Before her position was exposed, she had killed 5 people in an instant. At first, squad leader Feng and the others didn't notice anything strange about the exchange of gunfire until they heard the gunfire of the illegal militants suddenly split into 2 waves, one towards them and the other towards the front. Squad leader Feng's eyes immediately lit up with joy as he continued to fire. He excitedly said to He Wei, listen to the gunshots. She was fine. It's right ahead. He Wei could only hear the whooshing sounds of bullets whizzing past his ears. Squad leader Feng's words reached He Wei's ears amidst the hail of bullets. In an instant, tears appeared in the eyes of the unyielding soldier. Soon, all the peacekeeping soldiers knew that the gunshots in front of them were from their female soldiers. Everyone became excited and no longer avoided fighting. Instead, they began to fire continuously in the most intense way. Chapter 42-53. The 3 of you, lock onto point A and suppress them with your firepower. The 3 of you, lock onto point B, the 3 of you lock onto point C, and the 3 of you lock onto point D. Suppress them with all your firepower. Don't let them advance even half a step. Suppress them until their range of movement is limited to points A, B, C, and D. Do you understand? There were a total of 15 people, and the platoon leader would assign them to their respective combat positions. The other 3 would provide support and assault. Their aim was to shoot accurately. Once the enemy moved beyond points A and D, they would immediately finish shooting. The entire battle was a semicircular arc battle. The outside of the semicircular arc were the peacekeepers, while the inside of the semicircular arc were the illegal militants. The innermost part of the semicircular arc was Yi Qian, who was behind the illegal militants. A chain of fire had been pulled up, and the Chinese peacekeepers launched a self-defense counterattack. The peacekeepers had all undergone strict training. They had to be selected before they could become a member of the peacekeeping team. After a strict selection process, they could enter the peacekeeping force and be sent abroad. From soft to hard, they were considered to be among the best in their platoon. Their combat ability had withstood the test, and so had their ability to withstand pressure. Even if it was their first time exchanging fire with the illegal militants, and their first real combat, They did not hesitate to raise their guns and counterattack in self-defense against the illegal militants. This was a self-defense counterattack. In order not to cause trouble and not to get involved, it was completely self-defense. Therefore, even if the United Nations found out about this, they would not punish the Chinese peacekeepers, nor would they be condemned. As for Yi Qian, she was the type who did not feel any psychological burden. She did not feel that fighting alone was a very dangerous thing to do. The illegal militants were at most a platoon of soldiers from her position, so she did not feel any psychological burden. This was a battle where the military strength was not equal, but the Chinese side's strength was far greater than the enemy's. The Chinese peacekeepers, who were stronger, fought calmly throughout the battle. The illegal militants, who were at a disadvantage, were already flustered and exasperated. They thought that they only needed to exchange fire with the Chinese peacekeepers in front of them, so they did not guard their backs at all. Because the road into Cowell Town was controlled by them, they did not think about guarding their backs at all. Yi Qian's gunfire instantly threw the illegal militants into chaos. Amidst the gunfire, they were so angry that they had no choice but to divide their forces to guard their back. "Kill him! Kill that damned bastard!" The angry voices from the illegal militants' camp had long been covered by the gunshot. Yi Jian couldn't hear them, and neither could the peacekeepers in the crossfire. It could have been resolved peacefully, but since the enemy chose to start a war, then so be it. The entire exchange of fire lasted for about an hour. From the initial intense gunfire to the end, it became sporadic. The Chinese side continued to fire, while the enemy's fire was extinguished. In the end, the entire crossfire was completely quiet. The Chinese peacekeepers stopped shooting and quietly waited to see if there was any more movement in front of them. He Wei still wanted to go closer to take a look, but squad leader Feng pulled him back. "It doesn't matter. Let's wait a little longer." He was waiting to see if there was any movement ahead, waiting to see if there would be more sneak attacks ahead. The hardest thing to defend against on the battlefield was a sneak attack. You might think that the enemy was all dead, but in reality, there were still people hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to take down the enemy before they died. Therefore, there was no need to rush out immediately. You had to wait for at least 5 minutes. That was the minimum amount of time. It was the same for Yi Qian. Chapter 42-54. She was able to hit the target with every shot, but the peacekeepers were shooting blindly. If they shot blindly, there would be deviations and they would lose the accuracy of their targets, which meant that they would lose 100% of their kills. In a night battle, they had to be on guard against sneak attacks. It was already past 10 o'clock at night. The night wind had yet to disperse, and the thick smell of blood mixed into the wind. It was so thick that it was nauseating. The stars were sparse and the moon was bright. It was peaceful and quiet, but the smell of blood in the wind added an iron-like weight to the night. Yi Qian began to move, and so did the transport soldiers. The returning trucks drove back, and the bright headlights blocked the night once again. The entire battlefield entered everyone's eyes. He Wei and squad leader Feng saw Yi Qian again. They saw the female soldier who gave them the chance to survive. They saw the female soldier whose face was stained with smoke and whose black eyes were brighter than the stars in the sky. The unyielding man's eyes had already turned red. "We'll see later. Let's clean this place up first." Squad leader Feng smiled and patted He Wei's shoulder. The moment he saw Yi Qian walk under the headlights, squad leader Feng's tense heart finally relaxed. When he saw his soldier standing there like a wooden stake with a bit of hesitation in his eyes, he knew why his soldier was hesitating. He wanted to go over and say something to the female soldier, but he felt guilty and did not dare to move forward. He then said, "Talk to her properly when we get in the car." He Wei retracted his gaze and softly said, "Okay." Then, he said, "Squad leader, do you know which unit she's from? Why? Do you want to play some tricks?" Squad leader Feng teased. "No." He Wei reacted, and his face was a little hot. I'm engaged in my hometown. I have a fiancée. I just want to know which unit she's from. I'll thank her properly when we get back. That's not right, kid. Didn't you say you were single during the investigation? How did a fiancé suddenly appear out of nowhere? Squad leader Feng was shocked by the sudden news. This kid, he hid it well. If he didn't make fun of him, he wouldn't have known he had a fiancée. He Wei chuckled and quickly slipped away. If you want to thank her properly in the car. You won't be able to find her when you return to China. Looking at Bing, who had slipped away, Squad leader Feng reminded him with a smile. Squad leader Feng then looked at the female soldier who was talking to the platoon leader. There was respect in his eyes. It was rare for a female soldier to be this powerful. When he returned to China and chatted with his brothers, he could only keep this part to himself because they definitely wouldn't believe that a female soldier could escape from 2 platoons of enemy forces by herself. Yi Qian, who had just walked out of the battlefield, was talking to the platoon leader. His eyes were slightly lowered. Under the car lights, his side profile was beautiful, but his eyes were sharp. They want to take control of Cowell Town and Jenny City. We need to get back as soon as possible. When they came out of Cowell Town, nothing much happened. Now that Yi Qian mentioned it, the platoon leader's face darkened. After the battlefield was cleaned up, everyone boarded the vehicles and immediately returned to the camp. After boarding the vehicle, He Wei and squad leader Feng didn't have the chance to say thank you to Yi Qian. Yi Qian had been communicating with the platoon leader and found out that the Storm Commandos had entered Jenny City to rescue Commissioner Miao and his team. When they arrived at the camp, Yi Qian got his communication equipment and reloaded his ammunition. He didn't stop at all and immediately headed to Jenny City to receive the latest news. When the armed forces were trying to transfer Commissioner Miao and his team, they were kidnapped by the illegal armed forces. This meant that Commissioner Miao, the 3 students, and Yang Heng were now in the hands of the illegal armed forces. Chapter 42-55. Cowell Town was also caught in the chaos of war. There were even illegal militants operating less than 3 kilometers away from the camp. The camp had originally wanted to send 5 people to Yi Qian to go to Jenny City, but Yi Qian declined with a smile. Cowell Town, which was also caught in the chaos of war, was not as safe as Jenny City. Since the illegal militants had already drawn their swords to the Chinese peacekeepers, there would be a second time. Moreover, they were already operating near the camp, which was enough to show their ambition. Yi Qian was worried that something would happen to the camp. Fortunately, the Libyan government had sent some troops and 2 heavy machine guns to support them. Yi Qian was relieved when he left. Yi Qian, who was good at fighting alone, left without any fear. She wore a helmet, desert combat uniform, combat boots, tight knee pads, and a tactical vest equipped with individual communication equipment. She also packed battlefield medicine. Her back looked particularly dashing as she rushed into the night. The 2 camp leaders who watched her leave were stunned. Those who knew that she was risking her life to enter Jenny City alone to provide support, but those who did not know would think that she was going on vacation. That back view, that pace, dashing, neat, dashing, and even more so, fierce. What guts! Which army did this soldier come from? I want to learn from her when I return to China, one of the leaders said with a low laugh, not hiding the surprise in his voice. The other leader thought for a moment and sighed with a smile. Soldiers like her are rare. Mainly, she's young and steady. She's also a female soldier. Let's see if we can find one in a million. Going to the battlefield alone, her courage is commendable. Commendable courage comes from her own strength. She fought alone against 2 platoons and successfully escaped. If old Feng didn't tell me, I wouldn't have believed it. The leader who started the conversation had already concealed the surprise in his voice. There was only admiration left. I think it will be difficult for us to meet such a unique female soldier in the future. Ha ha ha, she is indeed unique. She walked alone with the momentum of thousands of soldiers and horses. I was worried that she wouldn't be able to enter Yeni City safely. Now I don't have much to worry about. Don't worry. We should think about what to do next. The illegal militants have already set their sights on our camp. We have to be prepared. Yes, it's urgent. The sound of a jeep starting up came from the front. This was the transportation provided by the camp to Yichien. Although walking was safe, it would take too much time. On the other hand, although it was dangerous, it would save a lot of time. Yichien chose to use the jeep instead of walking, shortening the time to reach Yeni City. The two camp leaders retracted their gazes from Yichien's departure. Their expressions were grave as they turned back to the camp. The most important thing now was to protect the camp. Then, they had to draw up a plan of retreat. Only by being prepared with both hands would one not be thrown into confusion in the face of an enemy. Yichien, who was driving alone, left the camp and headed straight for Yeni City. He also sent a message to the storm commandos about his current location. Li Jinyan received the location from Yichien, and a faint smile flitted across his cold eyes. He had considered leaving her in the relatively safe barracks, but in the end, he gave up. This was because he felt that his sister preferred the battlefield. Come on then. He knew it was dangerous, but he still let her come. Even though he knew it was dangerous, he still had to face it. This was the only way to live up to his military uniform. Chapter 4256. Yichien's entry into Yeni City was extremely difficult. The road from Cowell Town to Yeni City was also controlled by illegal armed groups, and the government forces were carrying out a comprehensive cleanup. This forced Yichien to abandon the car midway and head to Yeni City alone through the crossfire. By the time he arrived at Yeni City, it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. The battle in Yeni City was still raging. The three sides had not stopped fighting, and the entire city was so chaotic that no one dared to sleep. The entire city's transportation, lighting, and communications were all paralyzed. Yichien, who had entered Yeni City with the sound of gunfire, was stunned by the scene before him. He could not move for a long time. Yeni City was located on Libya's longest and most beautiful coastline. The scenery was beautiful, the products were abundant, and the buildings were even more beautiful. It was the most unique tourist city in Libya. Before the civil war, it had been a paradise, attracting countless tourists to Yeni City for a vacation. But now there was no trace of paradise. The broken beams and broken pillars were so dilapidated that it was desolate as far as the eye could see. The night did not cover the ruins of the city. Instead, it added to the despair of sinking into a swamp. The beautiful scenery of the past was gone, and only the flames of war remained. There was a slight movement. Yichien, who was hiding in the dark, moved slightly to the side. His gaze had already locked onto the source of the movement. She saw two small figures struggling to crawl through the ruins. They took turns to help each other climb out of the ruins that had been destroyed by the artillery fire. Completely exposed to Yichien, they quickly lightened their footstep. However, there was still a slight sound coming from under their feet. Dressed in rags, they did not know that there was a pair of eyes watching them from the dark until they were far away. They were fleeing toward the outskirts of the city. Here, their home was no longer there, so they could only leave. Yichien pursed his lips and looked down. He gripped the rifle in his hand tightly. When he looked up again, the coldness in his eyes had increased. Without stopping, Yichien quickly headed toward the train station. At that moment, Yang Heng, who was as calm as water, stood in front of a few illegal armed groups, blocking their path. Behind Yang Heng was Commissioner Miao and his 3 students. Commissioner Miao's foot was injured by a stray bullet, so it was difficult for him to walk. Yang Heng stood at the front, while the 3 students stood in front of Commissioner Miao, staring coldly at the illegal militants. 3 hours ago, they had fallen from the hands of the NRRL militants into the hands of the illegal militants. They were now locked in the office of the train station staff, controlled by 4 illegal militants. Just now, 3 armed illegal militants had entered the office. They did not come with good intentions and directly pointed their guns at him. Yang Heng was the first to react. He stood at the front of the group. Before the other party spoke, he remained silent, waiting for the other party to speak. The dazzling torchlight swept across. The 3 armed illegal militants seemed to be confirming something. They looked at each other one by one until the torchlight landed on Commissioner Miao's calf, who was blocked at the back. Come out!" A cold voice sounded, pointing at Commissioner Miao, who was sitting down. 2 armed illegal militants were already walking towards Commissioner Miao with guns in their hands. They intended to drag Commissioner Miao away by force. Yang Heng stepped forward and blocked their path. He said coldly, "They're just ordinary construction engineers. I'm an interpreter sent by the Chinese Ministry of Defense. I'm a Chinese peacekeeping soldier." Ordinary construction engineers and Chinese peacekeeping soldiers. The illegal militants chose peacekeeping soldiers. Chapter 4257. They needed the government forces to retreat. It would be more effective to threaten them with the lives of the Chinese peacekeepers. The battle in Yenny City started at 4 in the afternoon and it was almost 1 in the morning. It had been 8 hours and the government forces were already exhausted. The NRPL militants were ambushed from the rear by the illegal armed forces. It was a perfect example of going for wool and coming home shorn. Instead, they were the first to retreat at around 11 in the evening. The NRPL's original plan was to kidnap the Chinese engineers and force the Chinese peacekeepers, including the engineering team, to withdraw from Yenny City and Cowell Town. Who knew that before the plan could be implemented, the illegal armed forces would use heavy weapons to force them to retreat. In the end, a small leader of the illegal armed forces led the team to kidnap the Chinese engineers. At 6 in the evening, the illegal armed forces that launched an attack with the train station as the center became the biggest winner of the battle. Li Jinyan and his group of 15 people entered Yenny City just as the illegal armed forces launched an attack on the NRPL. As a result, their plan to enter the train station to rescue Commissioner Miao and the other 4 was delayed. Even the Chinese peacekeepers in Yenny City were attacked by the illegal armed forces. At around 6 in the evening, Yi Qian was fighting with the illegal armed forces in the tropical forest near a village about 25 kilometers away from Cowell Town. The Chinese peacekeepers in Yenny City exchanged fire with the illegal armed forces. The water ghosts of the storm commandos tried to break through the fire several times but failed to break through the NRPL and the illegal armed forces line of fire. When Yi Qian and the Chinese peacekeepers who came to rescue her joined forces to defend themselves, the illegal armed forces landed a mortar at the entrance of the Chinese camp. It was only 3 meters away from falling into the camp. The mortar shrapnel caused 2 of the Chinese peacekeepers to be seriously injured and 4 to be lightly injured. At 6:00 in the morning, almost 8 hours later, a domestic military transport plane rose into the air from the depths of the mountains at 1:00 in the morning and headed to the border at the fastest speed. On this day, several civilian planes flying to the border were delayed for some reason. At this time, the train station in Yenny City at 6:00 became the biggest crossfire point. All the entrances to the train station were blocked by the flames of war, and there was no way to enter. The storm commandos tried to find the entrance several times but were forced back by artillery fire. The government forces, the NRPL militants, and the illegal militants fought separately. At 10:00 in the evening, the NRPL was defeated. Even Commissioner Miao and his group of 5 had fallen into the hands of the illegal militants. It was 10:00 at night in Libya, and 6:00 in the morning in China, which was 8 hours ahead of Libya. The civilian transport plane that had taken off from the border for an hour was about to leave the country. There were 15 special passengers on the transport plane, led by the captain of the Snowfield Brigade, Xia Jinyuan. He led 14 special forces of the Snowfield Brigade to the coastline of Yenny, Libya, to complete the airborne landing. A projector was turned on, and a combat map was projected onto the white door between the cabin and the passenger seat. A red dot was reflected on the map, and as Xia Jinyuan spoke, the red dot moved slowly. Xia Jinyuan, who was holding a laser pointer, pointed at the map and said coldly, "We will complete the airborne landing here. This time, the situation is special. Considering that there are heavy weapons in the city, we will complete the airborne landing at an altitude of 5,600 meters. In order to avoid being exposed, we will leave the aircraft at high altitude and open the parachute at low altitude. The landing point will be the sea surface." Chapter 4258. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the battle map projected onto the cabin door. Their chiseled facial features were stern, and even their gazes were like sharpened knives, suffused with coldness. In the cabin, Xia Jinyuan's cold voice rang clearly in the ears of the team members. "Enter Uni City. Everyone will enter the stronghold of the illegal militants directly and complete the tail-cutting operation. The entire operation is a secret operation. Everyone must hide their identities well. Remember, don't let anyone see you appear in Uni City. Do you understand?" "Understood." An orderly and murderous voice rang out. Their morale was high, and there was no trace of fear. This operation of the Snowfield Brigade was a secret operation. Other than Commander-in-Chief Xia and Major General Yang, who knew where the Snowfield Brigade was going to carry out the mission, the rest, including the Chinese peacekeeping forces, did not know that another Chinese special force would arrive in Uni City in 18 hours. The civilian transport plane contained all kinds of supplies to Uni City, including food, clothes, and most of them were medical supplies. This was a civilian transport plane for medical supplies. After entering Libya, the radar would be turned off for an hour. After flying over the coastline of Uni City, the 15 special forces of the Snowfield Brigade would be airborne before the radar would be turned on again, and they would land in Cowell Town to complete the supplies. At 1:00 in the morning in Uni City, Yi Qian, covered in smoke, silently hid under the chassis of a pickup truck mounted with a heavy machine gun. At 1:00 in the morning, Yang Heng was taken away by the illegal militants. As he was being pushed away, Yang Heng heard a name in their conversation. The familiar name made Yang Heng's pupils contract. Alva, the military general of the Libyan government forces stationed in Uni City. He was responsible for guarding Uni City. And now he had become the Lieutenant General Alva that the illegal militants were talking about. Mutiny. Colonel Alva of the government forces had defected. At that moment, Yang Heng's calves trembled slightly. He thought of the Chinese peacekeeping soldiers stationed in Uni City. After all, Colonel Alva could freely enter and leave the peacekeeping camp. Yang Heng's lips trembled. What should he do? What should he do? How could he let the Chinese peacekeeping camp know that Colonel Alva had defected? At this moment, Yang Heng was not thinking about whether he would be in danger, but whether the soldiers in the Chinese camp would be in danger. At 2:00 in the morning, although the sound of artillery fire could still be heard in Uni City, it was the time when the sound of artillery fire was the weakest after a few hours of fighting. After several hours of fighting, the government forces and the NRPL were defeated and temporarily stopped their fiercest fire attacks. The Storm Commandos, who had entered Uni City around 6:30 p.m. and only approached the train station at 2:00 a.m., had black smoke all over their faces and bodies. The three sides of Uni City were engaged in a firefight, and all the roads in the city were sealed off. The Storm Commandos spent 6 hours to pass through the firefight and finally arrived at their destination. They were all on foot. Even if they walked normally, it would take them 3 hours to reach the train station. However, under the rain of bullets, it took them almost 7 hours to reach the train station, which was considered a fast march. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the front. The water ghosts, who were about 3 kilometers away from the train station, did not even have time to rest. Holding their breaths, they hunched their bodies and quickly hid in the ruins one by one like pitch-black cats. Chapter 42:59. They couldn't even breathe as they stuck close to the ruins, listening to the footsteps coming closer and closer. Finally, the footsteps were less than 3 meters away from them until the sound disappeared. When the footsteps stopped, the sound of bricks rolling suddenly came from the ruins. The big eel, who was closest to the source of the sound, raised his eyes and looked behind the collapsed wall behind him. With just a glance, he was as agile as a tiger out of its cage. He instantly crossed the broken wall that was more than 1 meter high and caught a shadow that was shocked by the falling brick. Freeze! Suppressing the shadow, the big eel's hand had already covered the shadow's mouth to prevent him from making a sound. 5 members were on guard, and the other 8 members immediately cleaned up the surroundings to see if there were any suspicious people. Li Jinyan was already standing in front of the shadow that was subdued by the big eel. This was a small leader of the NRPL militants who had escaped from the illegal militants' massacre. The cold barrel of the gun was pressed against his head. Li Jinyan pried the latest news of Commissioner Miao and his team from the other party's mouth. Specialist Miao and his team had fallen into the hands of the illegal militant. The danger factor had soared. It was like a sword hanging above their necks that could fall at any time. Devil, we have to act as soon as possible. The big mermaid's eyes were cold. She suppressed the trembling in the depths of her heart and said, "We have been kidnapped by the illegal militants for almost 4 hours. I am worried now." Worried about what? The big mermaid didn't say it out loud. There was no need to say it. The NRPL militants were led by the former president. At least he was against the current Libyan government. He was polite to the peacekeeping officers and soldiers of several countries in Libya. Therefore, Commissioner Miao and his team were relatively safe when they were kidnapped. But they fell into the hands of the notorious illegal militants who didn't abide by international law. Then, would Commissioner Miao and his team have any casualties? The casualties that the big mermaid was worried about had already appeared. The latest news was like a boulder that hit everyone's heart. Everyone's heart sank and their eyes were filled with killing intent. They are still in the train station. As long as they haven't left, we still have a chance, Li Jinyan said with cold eyes. A clear voice suddenly sounded. I am Qing Niao. I have arrived near the clock tower of the train station. The clear voice was none other than Yi Qian, who had just entered Yeni City at around 1 o'clock in the morning. Her voice was clear and very low. It was obvious that she was speaking in the public channel. The 15 water ghosts, including Li Jinyan, were all stunned. Yi Qian, who had just entered Yeni City an hour ago, appeared at the train station and entered the clock tower of the train station? Did she fly here? Yi Jian didn't fly over. She just hitched a ride. To Yeni, Yi Qian, to the train station, to Yeni then Mia, to Yeni, Yi and Qian. Yi Jian explained why she had suddenly appeared at the train station in less than an hour and a half. At the same time, she also revealed why the Libyan government forces in Yeni City had been defeated. Because of the defection of Colonel Alwa, who was stationed there. He was a native of Libya. As Yi Jian spoke, she sent out her latest location. See Anemone, the scout of the Storm Commandos, saw it and whispered, "That's right. She is near the clock tower of the train station." How can she be so lucky? A team member whispered, voicing everyone's thoughts. They had spent 7 hours and almost lost their lives. Qing Niao had entered the train station in less than an hour and a half. Wasn't that good luck? Chapter 42:60. Although the team members were whispering softly, they were all in the same channel. Yi Qian could hear them clearly no matter how low their voices were. She was already smiling as she approached the train station alone. She sighed. My luck only improved slightly when I reached Yeni City. Before I came here, I had to fight all the way. When I entered Cower Town, I had to fight with the illegal militants twice. When I entered Yeni City, I encountered them again. In the end, I had to abandon the car. Fortunately, my luck only improved when I got here. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I would still be wandering around outside when you guys rescued her." With a smile and a sigh, she explained the dangers she faced on her way here, causing the faces of the water ghosts of the storm commandos to turn solemn. She lightly brushed off the dangers on her way here with a smile, but they knew how difficult it was for her to come to Yeni City alone. "Thank you for your hard work, Qing Miao. You're the best female soldier we've ever seen. Qing Miao, wait for us. We'll meet up with you soon. Don't run around. The train station is the illegal militants' stronghold. You must be careful." The voices of the storm commandos came through the earpiece. Their voices were all tense, afraid that Yi Qian, who had already entered the hinterland, would meet with misfortune. Yi Qian exhaled a mouthful of smoke. She looked around and chuckled softly. "I'll be careful here. Don't worry about me. Alva has deployed at least 10 heavy machine guns. You guys have to be careful when you come in." Li Jinyan's lips were pressed tightly together. They were as sharp as a knife. He had made a mistake. He had not predicted that Yeni City and Cower Town would become the focus of the illegal militants' crossfire. If he had thought of it in advance, then his sister would not have to take such a huge risk and come to Libya because of him. She was still a military academy student. She should be in the country, sitting in a spacious and bright classroom for lessons, and not passing through the smoke to come to Yeni City. Li Jinyan, who had adjusted his emotions, said coldly, "Qing Miao, we're about 3 kilometers away from the train station. Now was not the time to feel guilty. They had to find Commissioner Miao and get them out of here as soon as possible." As he spoke, he gently raised his hand, and the NRPL militants who had no ability to resist were killed by Big Eel. He looked in the direction of the train station and said coldly, "The latest news is that Commissioner Miao and his group of 5 fell into the hands of illegal militants and are hiding in the train station. There's an air raid shelter at the Yeni City railway station. Commissioner Miao and the rest are probably still in the air raid shelter. The entrance to the air raid shelter is the west waiting room. Go to the west waiting room now and look for a vantage point to meet us." Li Jinyan had a map of the train station provided by the Chinese engineers in Yeni City. It included both the ground and the underground, including the underground drainage system. "I'm heading west now." Yi Qian, who had been observing the surroundings, began to move stealthily. He said, "The entrance to the bomb shelter is on the west side. Alva will also head west after he alighted." "Something's wrong." Before he could finish, Yi Qian quickly ended the call. Her body was pressed against a marble column. She held her breath and slowly moved around the column as the illegal militants walked out quickly along the corridor of the train station. When she could only see their backs, Yi Qian dashed out, skimmed over a few pieces of waste stones, and then crouched down to hide. The train station was so big, and there was no telling how many illegal militants were hiding under the air raid shelter. It would take too long to search like this. It was better to try to find the rebel general, Alva, and see if they could find Commissioner Miao and the rest through him. Chapter 4261. The Yeni City Railway Station was a huge circular building. The circular building was surrounded by a circular corridor with a dome design that was characteristic of Libya. Outside the corridor was a pointed building. The circular building was a huge square. After walking through the corridor, passing through the marble columns and down the stairs, one would reach the circular square. In the middle of the circular square was a fountain. Before the Civil War broke out, the railway station in Yeni City was also a tourist attraction. Countless tourists would sit on the circular stone steps on all sides of the square. They would watch the fountain in the middle of the square rise and fall, listen to the songs of the wandering musicians, and watch the pigeons and tourists stroll in the square with some snacks in their palms. The pigeons, who were used to blending into the crowd to find food, flapped their wings and flew back to the square. A group of youthful Libyan young people danced to the beat of the music. Countless tourists raised their cameras and took pictures of the scenery in Yanni City railway station. Before the Civil War broke out, even the railway station was a paradise. But now, the buildings around the circular square were almost all destroyed. The dome design of the circular corridor was half collapsed here and there. Huge rocks were scattered around, and it was full of decay. As for the fountain in the middle of the square, it had not spouted clear water since the Civil War broke out. Even the pipes were rusted. Yi Qian, who was hiding in the corner of the corridor, let out a sigh of relief and continued to approach the west. When she was hiding in the clock tower, she saw Alva leading his guards to the west of the railway station. Now that the entrance to the air raid shelter was also on the west side, she had to find a way to enter the shelter. The train station was not peaceful. The illegal militants who had already occupied the train station began to push forward. They would use the train station as the center to drive out all the government forces and NRPL militants in the entire city. This would be the stronghold of the rebel Arwa. The most dangerous place was the safest place. This was also the important reason why Alva did not leave the city but entered the railway station with heavy firepower. The government forces probably thought that the rebel Colonel Alva had already left Yanni City. As Yi Qian approached the air raid shelter entrance on the west side of the railway station, the water ghosts of the storm commandos also began to move quickly. They had to meet up with Yi Qian as soon as possible. All the water ghosts were very worried about her entering the railway station alone. 3 o'clock. Sentry. Avoid. 300 meters forward. Turn right. In the ruins, dozens of black shadows moved forward at high speed, alternating between the front and back of the train station. Without much communication, they entered the interior of the train station as quickly as possible. A military vehicle equipped with a heavy machine gun drove out from the bus stop of the train station, followed by a convertible jeep and a truck carrying dozens of armed illegal militants. The sound of the vehicle's motor made the advancing dark figures quickly move out of the way. Yi Qian, who was approaching the west side of the train station, rolled a few times before finally hiding in the corner formed by a pile of boulders. Something's wrong. There are at least 3 cars coming from the west side of the train station. Yi Qian, who had hidden herself well, reminded her comrades outside in a low voice. At this moment, the storm commandos were her comrades. He took out the night vision foldable binoculars from his tactical vest. Yi Qian, who was hidden in the angle, scanned the direction where the motor sound came from. His line of sight was blocked, so he couldn't see it immediately. He asked, "My line of sight is blocked. The westernmost side is a parking lot, right?" Chapter 4262. Scout C. Anemone's voice came through the earpiece. "That's right. The westernmost area is the tourist bus parking lot." "Okay, I'll find a vantage point to see if they're moving." Putting away the binoculars, Yi Qian looked around. Her eyes were cold as she quickly crawled out from the corner. Then, she used both hands to climb up the huge rock that was originally a marble column. She stepped on the huge rock with great agility, then jumped up. Her hands clung tightly to the broken section of the marble column that allowed her to climb to the top of the corridor dome. Using the strength of her arms, she climbed up the broken section and leaped onto the dome that had collapsed. Yi Qian, who was already at the vantage point of the circular plaza of the train station, crouched down. Her speed was a little too fast, and when she crouched down, her chest was pressed hard by a sharp and hard object. She was caught off guard and frowned. She touched it with her hand. It was a piece of shrapnel that had flown to the top of the dome. She readjusted her position and used the binoculars to observe the direction where the headlights were coming from. As she adjusted her focus, a military vehicle with a heavy machine gun was the first to appear in the binoculars. Then, a convertible jeep appeared. The moment the jeep drove out of her sight, Yi Qian's pupils constricted. Yang Heng was sitting in the jeep. "Found our personnel," the accompanying translator, Yang Heng. He's in the back seat of the second convertible jeep. There are 4 illegal militants in the car. Yi Qian's tone was light and quick as she reported the situation she had observed. The first car is a military vehicle with a heavy machine gun. The second car is a military truck. There are a total of. Yi Qian's gaze swept quickly. The departing military truck formed an image that was fixed in her mind. The people in the truck became numbers. Yi Qian accurately reported the total number of illegal militants in the military truck. There are 15 people in the military truck. In the military vehicle with a heavy machine gun, there are 2 drivers and a total of 23 illegal militants in total. The vehicle is now driving into Saiben Avenue. Yi Qian had seen a city map of Yenny in the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Cowell Town. He had focused on the map of the port, the train station, the shipyard, and a heliport that used to be used for commercial tourism. Now it was very useful. She had already memorized the traffic roads in these few places. Based on the change in the headlights, the approximate distance the car was driving, and whether it was turning left or right, she quickly calculated in her heart and was able to report which street the car was driving to. This way, the storm commandos outside would be able to make corresponding combat arrangements in the shortest time possible. Anemone thought that Yi Qian was also carrying a map of Yenny City. After hiding well, he spread out the map, and Li Jinyan began to deploy the battle according to the clues provided by Yi Qian. The accompanying translator, Yang Heng, confirmed that he was safe, so the next step was to rescue Yang Heng. Li Jinyan said, "Team B, save Yang Heng. Big Shark, lead Team A and continue forward." Team A received, Team A received. Team B received. Team B received. Team A was led by Big Shark to continue to the train, while Team B was led by Li Jinyan. They began to deploy the battle plan. Li Jinyan and Team A's battle plan was played out in the earpiece. Yang Heng was in the vehicle, and there were heavy machine gun military vehicles leading the way. A direct confrontation was definitely not going to work, so they could only use their wit. It was not easy to rescue Yang Heng without alerting the illegal militant. Even if they were to use their wits, it was still quite difficult. It was not realistic to make a move near the train station. Once the illegal militants were alerted, they would have a large-scale firepower support. There was no way they could escape successfully. They could only follow the vehicle closely and wait for an opportunity to make a move. Chapter 4263. The car had already driven about 5 kilometers away from the train station when an explosion occurred without warning at the corner of the crossroad. Flames soared into the sky, and smoke once again enveloped the city of Jenny. At 3:00 in the morning, the government forces took the lead to open fire on the illegal militants who had invaded the city of Jenny. The second the explosion occurred, Yi Qian, who had just approached the entrance of the bomb shelter, suddenly heard the explosion. Her eyes narrowed fiercely. She dodged to the side and asked in a low voice, "What's the situation in front?" The car was attacked. It should be the government forces opening fire on the illegal militant. Li Jinyan answered Yi Qian immediately. In the light of the fire, his eyes were as cold as ice. He said again, "The chance to rescue Yang Heng is here." The members of the storm commandos who had been chasing after them heard the explosion. They nimbly found cover on the spot. In less than 30 seconds, Devil King Li Jinyan was the first to get up. He shouted in a low voice, "Move forward quickly." The NRPL militants had been defeated and had to withdraw from the city of Jenny. Then, it was the Libyan government forces who were now firing at the illegal militant. Then, they had enough confidence to rescue Yang Heng as soon as possible. Gunshots rang out. Yang Heng, who was sitting in the open jeep, had his hands and feet tied. He was pushed out of the car very roughly by the guy who was holding him. "Damn it! Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" Yang Heng, who could not move, fell out of the car in a daze. Bullets hit the jeep. Bang! Bang! The illegal militant who was holding Yang Heng was about to lift him up when he was hit in the head by a bullet. Red blood and white brain matter splattered all over Yang Heng's body. His whole body fell directly toward Yang Heng. He did not fall on Yang Heng. Instead, he fell into the car with a bang. Blood flowed like an open tap. The body in the car was twisted strangely. Below him was Yang Heng, who had fallen out of the car. Half of his face was burning with pain. Yang Heng, who was lying face down on the ground, did not know that the man had been shot in the head. His face was splattered with blood as he listened to the dense gunshots that sounded like rain. His hands that were tied up trembled slightly. Facing the ground, Yang Heng steadied his mind and bent his body. Just as he was about to stand up, a warm and viscous liquid flowed onto his face, and the thick smell of blood assaulted his senses. As if he had thought of something, Yang Heng's expression suddenly changed and he vomited. No wonder these guys didn't drag him away when he fell. No wonder he heard something hit the car. It turned out Yang Heng vomited uncontrollably and turned his head to the side. His face was covered in blood, and he couldn't even take a deep breath. If he opened his mouth, the blood on his face would definitely flow into his mouth. His breath was surrounded by the thick smell of blood. Raising his arm, Yang Heng quickly lowered his head and wiped his face. At least he could open his bloody right eye. He didn't even look to see if the guy beside him was dead or alive. He hoped that the guy was dead so that he could untie the rope that bound his legs. "It's the government army. The government forces ambushed us. Retreat! Retreat!" The gunshots were mixed with the shouts of the illegal militants. They had already jumped down from the truck and started to fight back and retreat. Their voices were trembling. It was obvious that they were afraid. A black shadow approached Yang Heng as he lowered his head and struggled to untie the rope. Yang Heng suddenly sensed it and subconsciously dodged. He heard the black shadow say, "I'm a Chinese soldier." Chapter 4264. It was only 6 words in perfect Mandarin, but it made Yang Heng feel like he had found his home. At that moment, Yang Heng knew he had been saved. Just 5 minutes before they fired, the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Jenny City received a warning from the illegal militants, requesting all Chinese peacekeeping soldiers to evacuate Jenny City within 2 hours. If they did not evacuate Jenny City within 2 hours, then one of the Chinese peacekeeping soldiers in charge of translating would be sacrificed. This translator was Yang Heng. The members of the Storm Commandos received the message from the peacekeeping camp and learned that the translator, Yang Heng, was being controlled by the illegal militants. If the Chinese peacekeeping troops did not leave within 2 hours, the translator, Yang Heng, would be killed by the illegal militants at any time. Li Jinyan, who received the message, hid in a corner and aimed his rifle at the target who was trying to climb onto the military vehicle. He replied to the captain of the Chinese peacekeeping troops who spoke to him, "Give us 5 minutes to rescue Yang Heng." Within 5 minutes, Li Jinyan killed 4 of the illegal militants who were trying to get close to the unexploded heavy machine gun. Then, with his comrades covering him, Li Jinyan quickly approached the jeep and successfully rescued Yang Heng. The translator, Yang Heng, has been successfully rescued. His cold voice was transmitted to everyone's ears through the Justice Channel. Then, the scout, High Anemone, contacted the captain of the Chinese peacekeeping troops and reported the news. The captain let out a long sigh. He thought that the translator, Yang Heng, would be killed by the illegal militants, but now, he was saved. The captain, who let out a long sigh of relief, said to a peacekeeping soldier beside him, "Immediately tell the country that the translator, Yang Heng, has been successfully rescued." "Yes." The soldier, who looked happy, immediately contacted the country. Yi Qian, who had already met up with De Xiao and the others, was overjoyed when he heard the news. The government's sudden opening fire this time could be said to have helped the Storm Commandos, allowing them to rescue Yang Heng in the shortest time possible. Now that Yang Heng had been rescued, It was urgent to rescue Commissioner Miao and the 3 students. Commissioner Miao and the 3 students are still in the bomb shelter of the train station. The location is around the southwest corner, in a small bomb shelter where food is stored. Commissioner Miao's leg was injured by a stray bullet, so it's difficult for him to move. Yang Heng, who had been rescued, provided the latest news. Li Jinyan simplified his information for his comrades in the operation. The illegal militants guarding Commissioner Miao and the 3 students inside are waiting for news from the outside. If the Chinese peacekeeping force does not withdraw from Yeni within 2 hours, Commissioner Miao and the other 3 students will also be killed. Hearing this, everyone's heart was filled with a ball of fire. They wished they could just blow up the entire train station. Amidst the gunshots, Li Jinyan's cold voice clearly reached the ears of every comrade. "We'll meet up with you now. Find out where the remaining people are immediately." This time, he had to bring Yang Heng along. He picked up a rifle from the ground and handed it to Yang Heng. This was Yang Heng's self-defense weapon. He couldn't be alone, and the Storm Commandos couldn't leave anyone behind to accompany him. They could only let Yang Heng return to the center of the train station with them. Most importantly, Yang Heng knew the exact location of Commissioner Miao and his team. The firing of the government army woke up the illegal militants who were sleeping at the train station. It also made the rebel General Arwa sit up in shock. Knowing that the government army had suddenly fired at them, Arwa revealed a cold and vicious smile. Chapter 4265. At 3:00 in the morning, Jenny City was once again engulfed in artillery fire. Jenny City was a transportation fortress and had a special geographical location. The government forces that were temporarily defeated by the NRPL militants and illegal militants mobilized their troops and began a sweeping attack. Arwa, the rebel general, quickly made a judgment and mobilized his heavy weapons to fire at the government forces as well. The 2 armies engaged in a fierce battle. Countless civilians who had finally fallen asleep were caught in the artillery fire. They did not wait until the sun was about to rise and leave forever. The city was shrouded in smoke, and cries and screams could be heard everywhere. The government forces concentrated their fire on the train station. They had received orders to take down the train station within 3 hours and kill the rebel general, Arwa. Arwa, who had mobilized his troops, did not know that he had been exposed. He thought that he had deceived everyone and that his hiding place had not been discovered by the government forces. Mobilizing his heavy weapons, his eyes flashed with a fierce light as he opened fire on his former comrades. Yang Heng listened to the sound of the artillery fire that hurt his eardrums. He held his rifle tightly and did not even dare to blink his eyes as he followed the soldiers who led him through the smoke and avoided one group of illegal militants after another. Yang Heng heard his heart beating like thunder and knew clearly how scared he was at this moment. He was indeed scared. Before he was sent to Libya, the leader had a talk with him and clearly told him that the situation in Libya was unstable and that there were constant wars. It was a very dangerous country and it was very likely that he would not be able to come back if he went there. The leader asked him if he dared to go there. At that time, how did he answer? He was high-spirited like a newborn calf that was not afraid of tigers. He said loudly, "I dare. There is nothing to be afraid of if I go there. I will absolutely obey the arrangement." Yes, that was his resolute answer. He thought that he was well prepared and would not be a coward. But now, Yang Heng, who staggered, smiled bitterly. He was not far from being a coward now. It was only a short moment of distraction, and a black shadow instantly pressed Yang Heng and his gun to the ground. Yang Heng, who was in pain from the rubble on the ground, heard the leader of the operation team who had been carrying him say ruthlessly, "Do you still want your life?" The voice was cold and ruthless, like an unsheathed sword. It was so sharp that Yang Heng could not help but swallow. Yes, he wanted his life. Before he was taken away by the illegal armed forces, he was prepared to sacrifice himself. But now that he was saved, he cherished his life even more. A group of illegal militants who were engaged in a firefight with the government forces ran past the dilapidated street less than 3 meters away from them. Their footsteps were still so clear amidst the sound of gunfire. Only then did Yang Heng realize that he had been distracted for a few seconds and had almost collided with the illegal militant. The weight on his body was removed, and he heard the captain say, "We've arrived at the train station. We'll cross the square and arrive at the west side in about 10 minutes." The captain's voice was very cold, as if it was covered in snowflakes. After a slight pause, he said another word, "All right." Yi Qian, Big Shark, and the others had successfully entered the air raid shelter. They began searching according to the coordinates that Yang Heng had provided. Yang Heng had already gotten up and continued to move forward. This time, he didn't dare to be distracted again. He was afraid that if he was distracted again, he would lose track of her. Under the faint starlight, the soldiers who rescued him were all very agile, moving up and down at a very fast speed. They were much stronger than the peacekeeping soldiers he had seen before, and he felt that they should be able to move even faster, but they were dragged down by him. Could it be that the ones who saved him weren't the peacekeepers, but... Chapter 4266. A thought flashed through Yang Heng's mind, and it made his heart tremble. Special forces. The ones rescuing him were not Chinese peacekeepers, but special forces. Yang Heng, who had guessed the identity of the water ghosts, did not dare to be distracted. He was really afraid that he would lose them. Due to the government's concentrated attack on the train station, the illegal militants stationed at the train station were almost all out. The reason Yi Qian and the others could enter the air raid shelter so smoothly was because the enemies who were resting in the shelter had all come out to attack the government, so there were very few soldiers in the air raid shelter. There was an independent power supply in the air raid shelter. Even though the power supply in various parts of Manila was cut off, there were still lights here. Even if there were only a few 5-watt tungsten light bulbs, they could still light up a corner. Scout C Anemone made 2 hand signals. One indicated that there was a sentinel around the corner 3 meters away, and the other pointed at the light bulb, indicating that they should split up and move forward. Yi Qian replied with an OK hand signal. She was responsible for extinguishing the light bulb, and the others were responsible for taking out the sentinels. When they entered the air raid shelter, they had avoided the sentinels. Now that they were inside, they could only take out the sentinels. Otherwise, they would not be able to reach the depths of the air raid shelter through this winding tunnel. Extinguishing the light bulb was a small matter. She took out a bullet from the magazine, held it between her fingers, and aimed at the light bulb. Pa! The light bulb was hit by the bullet, and the crisp sound of glass shattering could be heard. This section of the tunnel was instantly plunged into darkness. Who? The sentinel's voice came from the darkness. Scout C Anemone had already rushed over, covering the sentinel's mouth and twisting his neck. The water ghosts, who had trained with the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces, were very familiar with twisting neck. Their skin color was different, so it was impossible to disguise as a sentinel. Before C Anemone, who had taken down a sentinel, could dodge, the sound of footsteps came from the front. Actually, there was nowhere to dodge. The air raid shelter tunnel was a serpentine tunnel with nothing on either side. There was nowhere to hide. C Anemone quickly pulled out a pistol with a silencer, intending to kill the intruder directly. Yi Qian's counterattack was even faster. She threw the combat dagger from her hand directly into the intruder's neck, not giving him a chance to discover C Anemone. Beautiful. After that, the Great Mermaid, who was sticking close to the wall, gave Yi Qian a thumbs up. However, Yi Qian did not see it. She sighed softly and stuck close to the cold wall as she waved behind her. The Big Mermaid and the other 4 followed closely behind, taking turns to move forward. It was very cold inside the dugout, But even so, Yi Qian's back was drenched in sweat. This was the most dangerous mission she had ever been on. Most importantly, there was no place to hide. If anyone came from the front, they would have to face them head-on. Fortunately, this was a snake-shaped tunnel, which could more or less provide cover. It took them 12 minutes to pass through this 7-meter-deep tunnel and arrive at a fork in the tunnel. To the right was a large space that could accommodate nearly 500 people, which was under the ring-shaped square of the train station. To the left was a complex terrain with individual rooms, which was usually the basement where officials hid. Yang Heng had said that they were locked in a dugout with complicated terrain, so Yi Qian and the others had to move to the left. The communication signal was weak. Li Jinyan, who was hiding near the entrance of the dugout, received the latest news intermittently. Just as he was about to answer, he heard gunshots coming from his earpiece. Chapter 4267. Li Jinyan's eyes sharpened when the sound of gunshots suddenly came from the earpiece. Scout Sea Anemone's voice was heard urgently. "Devil King, meet us outside." They had already rescued Commissioner Miao and his team and were preparing to retreat. Then there was no need for Yang Heng to lead the way. Almost as soon as Sea Anemone finished speaking, Li Jinyan said to Yang Heng beside him, "We've found them. Take care of yourselves outside." Yang Heng listened to the voice that was so deep that it sounded like water could be squeezed out of it. He clenched his rifle tightly and opened his mouth to answer, but he realized that his throat was so dry that it was painful. It was difficult for him to even say the word "okay." He could only nod quickly in response. They all wore night vision goggles and could see him nodding. Sensing Yang Heng's nervousness, Li Jinyan raised his hand and patted his shoulder gently. Before Yang Heng could say anything, Li Jinyan had already taken out his pistol and aimed at the sentry that was exposed in their line of sight. The sound of gunshots was still coming from the earpiece. The gunshots came too suddenly and did not fit the combat style of a stealth battle. It was as if they had directly exposed themselves and put all the team members who had sneaked into the bomb shelter in danger. Why did they suddenly shoot? The faces of the water ghosts, including Li Jinyan, darkened as a question mark appeared in their minds. They did not have time to ask why the gunshots were suddenly fired. Hearing Sea Anemone's urgent voice, everyone moved quickly and finished clearing the sentry outside. The bomb shelter was very deep, but it was already a chaotic battle. The few sentry guards outside were stunned for a few seconds when they heard the gunshot. They did not understand why there were gunshots coming from inside the bomb shelter. Then, a sentry picked up the whistle hanging in front of his chest. Just as he put it to his mouth to blow the warning signal, a bullet hit his forehead. Bang! 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 Several gunshots with silencers sounded in unison. They blended into the continuous explosions above the city and did not cause a ripple. 4 gangs entered the bomb shelter as quickly as possible. There were also 4 people who brought Yang Heng to stand guard outside. Yang Heng only needed to take care of himself. It was not time for him to join the battle. It was pitch black inside the air raid shelter. The independent power supply had been completely destroyed by the water ghosts of the storm commandos. The gunshots came from the end of the air raid shelter. Yi Qian, who was hiding in the corner, instantly killed several targets at a rate of 1 bullet per target. 2 of the targets were illegal militants who were about to shoot at Commissioner Miao and the others. Yi Qian and the members of the Storm Commandos had arrived just in time. As the government forces launched a strong attack, the illegal militants threatened the government forces with the excuse that they had Chinese engineers in their hands. At the same time, the illegal militants who had been keeping an eye on the Chinese peacekeeping forces camp reported that there were no signs of the Chinese peacekeeping forces retreating. The rebel Arwa had given the order to kill the Chinese engineers. Yi Qian and Sea Anemone, who were playing the vanguard, were just in time to save them. The illegal armed men's muzzles were already pointed at Commissioner Miao and his 3 students. As the bullets were loaded, gunshots rang out without any warning. When Yi Qian killed an armed illegal militant, the illegal militants who were not at the scene, including the rebel Arwa, did not realize that the first shot was aimed at them. Commissioner Miao and his 3 students watched as the illegal militant who was originally aiming at them was shot and fell to the ground. Then 2 more people fell to the ground one after another. In the end, the entire bomb shelter was plunged into darkness. Amid the chaotic gunshots, Commissioner Miao heard familiar Mandarin. "We're sorry we're late." Chapter 4268. The clear female voice pierced through the darkness and entered their ears. Commissioner Miao and the 3 students instantly understood that this was a soldier sent by the military to save them. The storm commandos who had split up quickly approached Yi Qian's location after the electrical equipment was destroyed. They cleared a path for Yi Qian and Sea Anemone to retreat. At the same time, Sea Anemone informed her comrades who were guarding outside to assist them in their retreat. Gunfire rained down in the pitch-black air raid shelter. When the rebel General Arwa learned that his hideout had been infiltrated and that even the Chinese engineer they had kidnapped from the NRPL militants had been rescued, he knew that the people who had entered the air raid shelter were soldiers sent by the Chinese side. Before tonight, he was also a member of the government army. He knew very well that once something like this happened, the government army would not be able to send troops to help the Chinese peacekeeping force. Therefore, these people were not government soldiers but Chinese soldiers. Kill them here. I don't want to see a single Chinese soldier leave this place alive. That was Arwa's order to his subordinates. The subordinates left in the air raid shelter used to be government soldiers, but now they were all members of the illegal armed forces. Everyone obeyed his orders and killed the Chinese soldiers who entered the air raid shelter. Yi Qian and Sea Anemone covered Commissioner Miao's group as they retreated. In front of them, Big Shark and the others had cleared a path. In the middle, under Yi Qian's instructions, Commissioner Miao and the 3 students bent down and stuck close to the wall as they passed through the smoke. "Quick, keep up! Sea Anemone to the left. Qing Miao, take them and retreat." Bullets rained down in the air raid shelter. Yi Qian and Sea Anemone could not immediately retreat after charging twice in a row. They were suppressed by the blind gunfire. The firepower of Arwa's bodyguards was very strong. They suppressed the storm commandos to the point that they could only dodge while fighting. Fortunately, they had the help of night vision goggles, so they could immediately find the target and finish shooting. On the other hand, the illegal militants were completely blind and even injured themselves. Soon, they also realized that the Chinese soldiers who came to rescue the Chinese engineer were very strong and immediately reported to Arwa. Arwa was hiding in the deepest part of the air raid shelter, which required him to bend down to enter. After learning that the Chinese soldiers who came to rescue him were powerful, he kicked away the round wooden stool beside his feet. His slightly bulging eyes emitted a fierce coldness in the darkness as he coldly said, "Go outside and blow this place up." Who would have thought that the ones who came here were not government troops, but Chinese peacekeepers? These damned bastards, he would teach them a lesson. He would teach them a lesson tonight and let the Chinese peacekeeping forces know the consequences of going against him. There were only 50 men left. Now that he knew how powerful the Chinese soldiers were, Arwa immediately retreated with the few men around him without any hesitation. Li Jinyan and his 3 comrades passed through the tunnel and shot at the back of the armed illegal militant. Screams were heard in the pitch-black air raid shelter, and the air was filled with the smell of blood. It was like being in a pool of blood. The entire air raid shelter was like hell. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of gunfire kept coming. The armed illegal militants who were attacked from the front and back suffered more and more casualties. They could not shoot accurately, and could only shoot based on their own judgment until their firepower became weaker and weaker. In the end, they could not fight back. At this time, Arwa had already escaped from the air raid shelter with 6 bodyguards. He did not leave immediately. Instead, He led his bodyguards to the waiting room of the train station. That's where their arsenal is. Chapter 4269. Retreat, retreat! Big Shark, cover us! Enter the basement entrance of the bomb shelter. Cover us from the front. Front cleared. Tunnel cleared. Retreat, retreat! Through the earpiece, the voices of his comrades could be heard clearly. The enemy's firepower had completely weakened. They needed to retreat immediately before reinforcements arrived. Stepping over the dead bodies of the illegal militants, his military boots were stained with sticky blood. His knees were slightly bent, his waist was slightly arched, his shoulder was pressed against the rifle's stock, his finger was placed lightly on the trigger, and he retreated from the bomb shelter in a combat posture. Yi Qian and Sea Anemone were protecting Commissioner Miao and his group of 4. Behind them were Big Shark and her other 2 comrades who were covering the retreat. In the green world, he could see many corpses lying around in the bomb shelter. Commissioner Miao, who was injured, tripped because of his inconvenience. Fortunately, the student who was supporting him held him tightly and prevented him from falling. Instructor, walk close to the wall. The student who was supporting him reminded him in a low voice. The very familiar voice made Yi Qian's footsteps quicken. She had just saved a senior from the blue team's electronic countermeasure technical support during the freshman year maneuver. Then didn't this senior recognize her long ago when she kept talking along the way? Indeed, he had recognized Yi Qian long ago, but not because of the person. When Yi Qian directly killed the illegal militants who were about to shoot at Commissioner Miao, this senior who was already a Ph.D. student did not immediately recognize that the female soldier who saved him was the junior who had fought with him before. It wasn't until she spoke that he finally recognized the female soldier who had saved him. Her voice was so familiar that he traced her voice all the way back. Junior Yi Qian. During her freshman year, she built a fake base station to stall the blue team. At that time, he was still a graduate student who majored in electromagnetism. He was beaten up by a freshman. Even though 2 years had passed, the memory was still fresh in his mind. During his time in school, he would hear about this junior's legend from time to time. From her freshman year to her junior year, she had beaten up all the other students and became a famous figure in the military school. Countless male students bowed to her. Even the four-eyed frogs, in the electromagnetism laboratory, who only knew how to do experiments, knew about their junior Yi Qian. In private, they even wondered if they should anonymously send a love letter to her school's internal mailbox. He was just talking about it. How could he actually do it? As one of the senior brothers who had been beaten by her before, and they had sat together and talked for a few hours. In the end, because of the suggestion of the pseudo-base station, they even discussed it a few times. Therefore, they were even more familiar with each other. After he entered the electromagnetism laboratory, he never saw his junior sister Yi Qian again. When they met again after nearly 2 years, she was the one who came to save him. He had always known that his junior sister was not simple. This time, he thoroughly understood that his junior sister was really not simple. After arriving at the 10-meter-long tunnel, he successfully met up with Li Jinyan and a few other comrades who had come to provide support. When he saw his brother quickly walking over, Yi Qian heaved a sigh of relief. At the very least, the front was cleared and they could leave without a hitch. His footsteps were hurried as he finally passed through the tunnel. The exit was right in front of him. Commissioner Miao and 3 other students came out first, followed by Yi Qian and Sea Anemone. Quick, quick, quick! Stay alert! A light mortar had been set up, and under Arwa's command, it was fired directly into the escape tunnel he had escaped from. The shell dragged a fiery tail behind it as it shot into the bomb shelter with great destructive power. Chapter 4270. Boom! Boom! An earth-shaking explosion came from the air raid shelter. The entire underground structure was destroyed. The originally empty air raid shelter was filled with sand and stones. The flames were like fire spewing out from underground. They were red and ferocious. In an instant, they devoured the illegal militants who still had their corpses intact. Li Jinyan, who was the last one, could clearly feel a heat wave pushing out from behind him like a train. At that moment, Li Jinyan directly rushed out of the exit. The water demon of the storm commandos was already crawling on the ground. Yi Qian and High Anemone immediately rushed over the moment they heard the explosion. They covered Commissioner Miao and the others who were rescued. The mortars were extremely lethal. If they were still in the bomb shelter, even if they were still in the 10-meter-long tunnel, they would definitely be injured. After the explosion, there was a loud sound of the bomb shelter collapsing. Yi Qian helped Commissioner Miao up and whispered, "Teacher, let's go." It was only then that Commissioner Miao said, "Okay. Thank you for your hard work." "Don't say that. This is what we should do." Yi Qian supported Commissioner Miao tightly and quickly retreated. A student next to him whispered to Yi Qian, "Junior, teacher's foot was injured by a stray bullet. It hasn't been treated yet." "Junior." A familiar voice was heard. Yi Qian knew that the senior who had interacted with him before had indeed recognized him. "Teacher, I'm sorry. We can't treat your wound yet. We need to leave the train station first." Yi Qian said guiltily. He asked the injured teacher to shift the gravity to himself. "We need you to bear with it for a while longer." Commissioner Miao was a core expert in the field of electromagnetic interference and electromagnetic weapons research. He could be said to be the backbone of the country. Nothing could happen to him. If anything happened to him, the country would lose its backbone. Yi Qian, who was responsible for protecting him, was very worried about his injury. However, there was no way to treat him in time. "It's okay. I'll follow your arrangements." Commissioner Miao, who was enduring the pain, could still face it with a smile. He was calm and indifferent. He had maintained a good attitude since he was kidnapped. He was not afraid at all. Sea Anemone squatted in front of Specialist Miao and whispered, "Let me carry you." Without giving Commissioner Miao a chance to refuse, Yi Qian quickly said, "Okay." Commissioner Miao, who did not reject the opportunity, was carried on Sea Anemone's back as they retreated. His trousers had long been soaked in blood, and the originally soft fabric had become very hard. The fabric clung tightly to the wound, temporarily acting as a hemostatic gauze. Specialist Miao was not the only one who was injured. Yi Qian's arm was also grazed by a stray bullet. Two of his comrades were also slightly injured. For them, these were all minor injuries. There was no need to stop and treat them. Their top priority was to evacuate as soon as possible. The government forces were still exchanging fire with the illegal militants, which undoubtedly gave them the best chance to retreat. Now they were heading directly to the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Jenny City. The evacuation was not very smooth either. Just getting out of the train station was very difficult. Arwa did not know if the Chinese peacekeepers had been killed. After firing a mortar, he mobilized his forces to search. However, his forces were limited, and he could not concentrate on the search. Passing through ruins after ruins and avoiding crossfire after crossfire, the special forces finally retreated from the train station after 2 hours with smoke billowing from their bodies. While treating the wound, Devil King Li Jinyan received a satellite call from the peacekeeping camp. The alert in the camp was raised, and they were ready for war. Chapter 4271. The Chinese peacekeeping squadron was silent for a long time. Perhaps he realized that the captain of the special forces, who was even more taciturn than him, would not take the initiative to speak. He struggled in his heart for a long time before breaking the silence between them. He whispered, "There is a batch of special materials in the camp and an electromagnetic weapons research specialist. We need to ask for your help to bring the special materials and the specialist out of the city." Also, we now suspect that there is an abnormal change in the senior officials of the Libyan government. The rebel Arwa is an example. We have to be careful. There must be a reason for 2 electromagnetic weapons research specialists to travel thousands of miles to a war-torn country, and this reason was not known to Li Jinyan. But now, Li Jinyan probably knew the reason. It probably had something to do with the special materials stored in the peacekeeping camp. Li Jinyan did not hesitate and calmly answered the captain. Okay, we are now 24 kilometers away from the camp. According to the current progress time, it will take 2 hours to reach 24 kilometers. Okay. We will wait for you. The captain breathed a sigh of relief. Requesting support from the brothers sent over was actually out of line. The Brotherhood Company only had one mission: to rescue Commissioner Miao and his group of 5 people who were kidnapped. Now that the Brotherhood Company had successfully rescued Commissioner Miao and his group, it was equivalent to completing half of the mission. When they moved to a safe area, the Brotherhood Company's mission would be completed. Now, he asked for the Brotherhood Company's help to transport a batch of special materials, which was actually an additional task for the Brotherhood Company. But he had no other choice. The engineering team was attacked by NRPL militants. This batch of special materials was escorted by the workers who risked their lives. The accompanying electromagnetism specialist had clearly told him the importance of this batch of special materials. Even if he knew very well that he was adding a heavy responsibility to the Brotherhood Company, he had to do it for the sake of the follow-up research of electromagnetic weapons. He believed that the captain of the Brotherhood Company did not need him to explain too clearly. As a soldier who fought bravely for the strength of his country, he would definitely understand what he was doing. Li Jinyan naturally understood, so he agreed without any consideration. After ending the call with the captain, Li Jinyan walked to the side of the big mermaid, who was treating the wound, and whispered. His voice was so low that the water ghosts next to him could not hear him clearly. Let's see how much we have. If there are more, we have to find a way to get a heavy weapon escort. There aren't many heavy weapons in the camp. Otherwise, they wouldn't have asked for our help. After hearing this, the Great Mermaid said with a serious expression, "Such an important special material must be escorted back to our country. I'll ask Commissioner Miao. He should know." The Great Merman was about to get up, but Li Jinyan pressed his shoulder and said, "I'll go ask. You treat your wound first." They were now hiding in a flour storage warehouse in a bakery. The location was quite hidden, and there was only one entrance. Once the iron door was closed, it completely cut off the light of dawn. It was so tight that it was a little airtight. The warehouse was huge. As long as they didn't stay in the warehouse for too long, they wouldn't run out of oxygen. After entering the warehouse, 4 of them stood guard outside while the rest immediately treated their wounds. Yi Qian was treating Commissioner Miao's wound, and the people who were illuminating her were none other than people who knew her. One was his senior brother, and the other was Yang Heng, who was still in shock and had his eyes fixed on Yi Qian. Chapter 42-72. Yang Heng didn't recognize Yi Qian until he entered the temporary hiding spot. Yang Heng had been retreating with Prawn ever since they came out of the dugout. He hadn't retreated with Yi Qian, so they hadn't bumped into each other. When they entered the warehouse, Li Jinyan instructed Yi Qian to treat Commissioner Miao's wound. Yi Qian replied, "Yes." Yang Heng was dumbfounded. He heard a voice that shouldn't have appeared here, but it did. When the light came on, the first thing Yang Heng did was look for the owner of the voice. He saw Yi Qian's face covered in paint, and his starry eyes were smiling at him. He didn't hear wrong, and he didn't recognize the wrong person. It was Yi Qian. She was the most unlikely person to ever appear in Libya, and he had never even thought that he would run into her. And yet, she was standing right in front of him with a smile on her face, and even, she was winking at him playfully. At that moment, Yang Heng was so shocked that he stood there motionless. Even now, he was still in shock. Why was Yi Qian here? Why was she here with this group of Special Forces soldiers to rescue him? Why was she so familiar with this group of powerful Special Forces soldiers? She could understand each other's intentions with just a glance and a gesture. How did she know them? Could it be that she was also a Special Forces soldier? But she was clearly a military school student. How did she become a Special Forces soldier? Why was she sent to Libya to carry out such a dangerous rescue mission without completing her normal schoolwork? Why? Yang Heng, who was holding a flashlight, had a million questions about Yi Qian in his mind. Why? Why couldn't he figure out the crux of the matter? There are shrapnel embedded in the wound. We need to remove the shrapnel and suture the wound. The cloth covering the wound hadn't been completely removed, and she could already see a piece of shrapnel with sharp edges. It was a shrapnel from a grenade. The incision was as sharp as a knife, and it had pierced deeply into Commissioner Miao's calf. Fortunately, it had pierced into the flesh and not the bone. They only needed to remove the shrapnel, disinfect the wound, and suture it. Her cold and calm voice pulled Yang Heng back to reality. Realizing what Yi Qian had just said, Yang Heng immediately asked, "Is it very serious?" His voice was still extremely hoarse, and his throat was so dry that it hurt. "Fortunately, it's not a serious injury," Yi Qian answered in a low voice. The dagger in his hand slowly and gently slit Commissioner Miao's trousers, which were stained with blood and stained with several layers of blood. The wound was a little big. When the cloth was peeled off, blood flowed out. Because the cloth was attached to the wound, Commissioner Miao was in so much pain that he couldn't help but take a few cold breaths. It was as if the wound had been torn apart again. It was a pain as if the flesh was being torn apart. Yi Jian raised her head and looked at Commissioner Miao with a gentle gaze. She said softly, "Teacher, if you want to bear with it, bite the cuff of your sleeve." Commissioner Miao, who was in his early 40s, had a rare local anesthetic allergy. Therefore, there was no way for him to get an anesthetic injection. He could only endure it until his forehead was covered in cold sweat. No matter how painful it was, the teacher, who still had an elegant temperament, smiled. He looked at the female student with an encouraging gaze. "Continue. Don't worry about me." In the tunnel of the bomb shelter, the doctor called Yi Qian, junior sister. Commissioner Miao knew that Yi Qian was a student of the National University of Science and Technology. Chapter 4273. Yi Qian didn't want to hide anything from her anymore, so she smiled at Yang Heng as soon as she entered the warehouse. Yi Qian had already accepted the fact that she had 2 acquaintances with her, and now she had a doctorate instructor with her. Commissioner Miao wasn't as surprised as Yang Heng and the others. The University of Science and Technology of China was a military school filled with talented people, and there were many top-notch talents among them. The female student who was treating his wound was one of those top-notch talents. He wasn't surprised that a female student from his school would appear here, but he was surprised that this female student had chosen to become a female soldier in the Special Forces. Yi Qian had already removed all the cloth covering the wound. Because she didn't treat it in time, the wound was swollen and inflamed. The black shrapnel had pierced into the flesh, and the surrounding skin tissue revealed a blood-red texture. It looked quite horrifying. The professor's senior was surnamed Zhao. When he saw that his tutor's injury was so serious, even his lips turned pale. No wonder the tutor didn't want the 3 of them to check his injury, and only used a towel to stop the bleeding. It turned out, the injury was so serious. Yang Heng asked Yi Qian in a low voice, "Are you going to remove the shrapnel now?" He actually wanted to ask if Yi Jian was confident that she could remove the shrapnel. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he thought of the unknown abilities that Yi Jian had from time to time. Yang Heng did not dare to ask if Yi Jian was confident. When Yi Jian did something, she would either ignore everything Once she did something, she would definitely have complete confidence. He was afraid that she really knew how to treat wounds that required a doctor to treat. First, disinfect the wound and clean it up. It's going to hurt a lot. Seniors, help me hold the tutor's calf. Yi Qian's last sentence was for the other two seniors who were waiting anxiously. They hadn't been able to help much, so they stood beside Commissioner Miao and watched closely, afraid that something would happen to their tutor. Hearing this, the two of them immediately nodded. One of the seniors asked, "What should we do?" "You arrange it." At this time, they could only listen to their junior. Whatever she arranged, they would do. Press down on the tutor's knee and let the tutor bite this piece of gauze. Yi Qian opened 2 battlefield hygiene kits, which contained syringes, tweezers, and disinfectant. He handed the gauze to one of his senior brothers. Yi Qian put on a mask for himself and said to Commissioner Miao, "Teacher, I'll start now. The shrapnel is a little big, and there are some fine grains of sand around it. I'll use a cotton ball to clean the sand before removing the shrapnel. Finally, I'll disinfect and suture the wound. It'll take at least 15 minutes. Commissioner Miao nodded with a smile. "I won't bite the gauze. Don't worry about me. It's not safe here. I can't implicate all of you because of me. 15 minutes is too long. Deal with it for me and we'll deal with it in detail when we get back to the camp." The doctor, who was holding gauze in his hand, frowned and said disapprovingly, "It's fine if you don't grit your teeth and take the gauze, but you want to drag it back to the camp to deal with it? No, your wound is inflamed. Instructor, don't force yourself. You've been holding on until your blood has wet your pants several times. 15 minutes. Hold on for 15 minutes. Junior will definitely take care of it quickly." The 3 doctors took turns persuading him. Yi Qian had already made all the preparations. Yi Qian said, "No, your wound is already inflamed. You've been injured for about 8 hours. It has to be treated immediately." Chapter 4274. Yi Qian put on a pair of white surgical gloves. She wore a mask, revealing only a pair of dark, cold, and calm eyes. "Our people are standing guard outside. Don't worry. This place is hidden, and it's not a crossfire zone. We're very safe now." Li Jinyan, who was standing not far behind Yi Qian, heard this and strode closer. He then said politely to Commissioner Miao, "We're very safe now. It won't be too late to leave after your wound is treated. There won't be any problems." Commissioner Miao only felt a little relieved after hearing what their captain said. As they spoke, Yi Qian had already started to clean Commissioner Miao's wound. Without anesthesia, he could only hold it in. The wound tissue was still trembling from the stimulation. Yi Qian said with a focused expression, "You've been in Libya for a while now, right? Will you go back to China directly to recuperate after this injury? The medical conditions in Libya are average. It's best to go back to China to recuperate." Commissioner Miao, who was not biting the gauze in his mouth, laughed. "How can I be so delicate? Why would I need to go back to China to recuperate from such a small injury? You're making a mountain out of a molehill. It's not easy to come here. I have to stay longer." Cleaning the wound was too painful. Commissioner Miao's voice was trembling. Yi Qian, who was looking down, also laughed. Her smile was blocked by the mask, so only her clear and beautiful smile could be seen. Under the bright white light, the smile between her eyebrows was like a blooming pear blossom. It was serene and beautiful. "If you still want to stay, then I have to be more meticulous. I'll clean the wound in one go. When we get back to the barracks, you just need to bandage it again." Yang Heng, who was quietly holding the strong flashlight, looked at Yi Qian, who was talking non-stop. His eyes flashed with a hint of thoughtfulness. Yi Qian reached out his hand. Li Jinyan, who was guarding him, passed a pair of tweezers to Yi Qian. He was also wearing white surgical gloves. The difference was that his gloves were very clean. Yi Qian's gloves were already stained with blood. "You're so confident. Did you study medicine part-time?" It seems like. Before he could finish his sentence, Commissioner Meow's body stiffened. The pain made the veins on his forehead and neck pop. Yi Qian had already removed the shrapnel, stopped the bleeding, disinfect. Yi Jian's actions were quick and orderly, while Li Jinyan cooperated with her the entire time. Whatever Yi Jian needed, as long as she said the name of the product, he would immediately pass it to her. The chemistry between the two of them further shortened the time needed. Yi Jian removed the last stitch and began to put on the gauze. At this moment, Commissioner Meow's face was completely pale. Yi Jian looked up and said in a calm and gentle voice, "Teacher, it's done. Do you want to check it?" There was a hint of mischievous teasing. Of you. Of course. Of course. You. You're right. I'll finish in 2 minutes. Yi Jian, who was sweating on her forehead, took off her mask. Under the strong light, her bright eyes and white teeth could be seen. Her face was extremely beautiful. When she smiled, she had an unparalleled beauty. Even her senior brothers could not help but take a few more glances at her. Li Jinyan noticed the sweat on Yi Qian's forehead. He took a piece of gauze and wiped it for her. His movements were gentle and focused. Yang Heng couldn't help but squint his eyes when he saw this. Their relationship seemed to be a little unusual. Chapter 4275. Yang Heng had also recovered from his shock. When he met Yi Qian, he was still in high school. Now, he had graduated from university and became a military translator. He thought he knew Yi Qian well. After all, they had worked together in high school to stop Yao Jing from causing trouble. They had fought in the same trench. Who knew his understanding of her was only the tip of the iceberg. He would never know what kind of person she was on the other side of the horn. He would never know how many secrets the Yi Qian he knew had. She must have a lot of secrets that no one else knew about. It was just like in high school, standing in front of the school's canteen. She was just one step away from walking into the light, but she stubbornly stood in the dark where the light couldn't reach. Her clear black and white eyes looked indifferently in front of her, as if she had a lot of secrets, as if she didn't fit in. Now, she was not out of place. A few years had changed her a lot, but she still had many secrets. For example, the male soldier who wiped her sweat. Their relationship was definitely not simple. It was obvious that their relationship was not ordinary. Boyfriend? He was very handsome, but his temperament was a little cold. Yi Qian also had a cold temperament and was alienated from the outside world. This handsome soldier was even worse. There was a coldness in his alienation that made people not dare to look at him. Even his voice was cold. Yang Heng did not know how they got along. As Yang Heng's thoughts were running wild, Yi Qian had already tied the bandage and ended the small surgery. Commissioner Meow, whose back was drenched in sweat from the pain, let out a long sigh. He leaned against the wall with the help of 3 students. He looked down at his calf that had been treated and saw a beautiful bow on the white bandage. The pain had not subsided yet. He laughed and said, "You're not being honest. You even tied such a beautiful bow. Do you want more people to see it?" Yi Qian was quite satisfied. Beautiful things make people happy. You're smiling now. Isn't it because you're happy? You have some philosophy. Not bad. Commissioner Meow nodded in agreement. He carefully sized up the female student from the National University of Science and Technology. Only now did he see clearly what this female student looked like. She was quite brave in battle, and could completely follow the rhythm of the male Special Forces soldiers. Although her face was painted with sweat, Commissioner Meow was familiar with her facial features. Such an outstanding female student who was a Special Forces soldier. He must have seen her in the National University of Science and Technology. Commissioner Meow had seen Yi Qian before, but not in person. That was why he felt a sense of familiarity. After resting for a while, the pain in his calf finally subsided. Commissioner Meow, who was in a good mood, smiled and sighed, "I'm old now. My body really can't withstand the pain like it did when I was young. When I was young, I could still joke with the doctor when I was cut by a knife. But now, I'm shivering in pain even when I'm taking out a shrapnel." The 43-year-old Commissioner Meow was not a rigid teacher. Instead, he was an elegant and witty lecturer who was deeply loved by his students. He sat up for a few seconds and started to make fun of himself. He even reminded his 3 students, "The 3 of you, remember? When you go back, don't tell anyone about my sorry state today. It's too damaging to your teacher's image. If I hear half a word of gossip when I go back, I'll directly cut the 3 of you." Chapter 4276. After that, Commissioner Meow looked at Yi Qian, and the smile in his eyes deepened. "You too. Even though you're not my disciple, I know who you are." In fact, it was a disguised warning to the students not to tell anyone about his injury, so that the colleagues and students in the experiment would be worried. As for who Yi Qian was, he couldn't remember for a while. The 3 senior brothers knew who Yi Qian was anyway. Hearing this, they couldn't help but lower their heads and laugh. Yang Heng also lowered his head and laughed. The professors of the National University of Science and Technology were not inflexible, and the other professor was the same. He was very humorous. Yi Qian, who was packing the hygiene bag, laughed. There was a light in his eyes, and there seemed to be a crystal-like light flowing in his eyes. "I will definitely keep my mouth shut. I will never reveal that you said something very rude when you were in the most pain today." "Student, why does it sound like you're threatening me?" "It's the first time I've been threatened by a student. It feels quite strange." Although Commissioner Meow's face had not recovered from the pain, he was in good spirits. He was full of humor, which made the 3 disciples beside him sigh in relief. Smiling, Commissioner Meow looked at the young soldier who spoke little but was the backbone of the entire team. "Captain, thank you for your hard work. I'm fine now. Can we set off?" Li Jinyan packed Yi Qian's hygiene bag. Hearing this, he raised his eyes and said politely, "You're welcome. There's something I want to confirm with you." "Please speak." When it came to business, the smile on Commissioner Meow's face had disappeared, and his expression instantly became serious. Li Jinyan told him about the batch of special materials that were waiting for them to transport out. Commissioner Meow pondered for a while before replying, "There's not much. Our technology is not very mature, so the refining speed is a bit slow. It's estimated to be less than 50 kilograms. It took us more than 2 months to refine 50 kilograms. It's related to the success or failure of a project. We must bring these 50 kilograms of materials back to the country." Just how special were the materials? Commissioner Meow knew, and so did the 3 senior brothers. So far, only 3 countries needed this material. This material was mainly used for ground-based charged particle beam weapons and space-based neutral particle beam weapons. The former was responsible for protecting strategic missile bases and other important targets, while the latter was set up on top of the space aircraft to intercept missiles in the air. These were all secret research that could not be told to outsiders. The materials used were all summarized as special materials. Only the researchers who joined the laboratory knew about it. Yi Qian could tell how important this thing was. It was so important, he was afraid that they couldn't just leave it in the car. What if they got caught in a crossfire and had to abandon the car? How could such a precious and special material not be discarded together with the carriage? Pursing her lips, she exchanged glances with Li Jinyan and asked softly, "Can I carry it with me? Will there be radiation?" She was also someone who had stayed in the laboratory before. She knew that many special materials had radiation, especially those that were extremely rare and only possessed by a few countries. "Yes, but we have it specially processed and then you can carry it with you. At that time, we took precautions against the security here and made preparations in advance," Commissioner Meow said solemnly, we must bring it back to the country. According to our plan, this batch of special materials will be immediately sent back to the country by a special plane. It's not safe to leave it in the camp now. We will bring it with us. The materials will be there with us, Li Jinyan calmly replied. Although his cold voice was light, every word was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Chapter 42-77. The sun was shining brightly outside, but the warehouse was pitch black. The map of the city was spread out on the ground. Li Jinyan held the flashlight in his hand, and his slender fingers gently stroked the map. His cold voice was clearly heard by his team members. Our position is here, and the peacekeeping camp is here. The straight line distance is 16 kilometers, and the detour is 24 kilometers. Now that the peacekeeping camp is on red alert, a battle may break out at any time. I plan to walk in a straight line and pass through this crossfire point. The importance of the special material made Li Jinyan realize that they had to race against time. The material was less than 50 kilograms, but it was the key to the progress of the entire project. If the material was not there, the entire project would stagnate, and the consequence of stagnation would be the backwardness of the country's weapons. The consequences would directly affect the strength of the country. Therefore, they had to race against time. 24 kilometers was shortened to 16 kilometers. A full 8 kilometers was shortened, and so was the time needed. Yi Qian's gaze stopped at the crossfire point. After a glance, she said to the communications soldier, "Daxia, let me see the satellite map. I passed by here last night." She had taken a ride here last night. Hiding in the chassis, she saw a fallen road sign. The headlights of the car behind swept past, and she vaguely saw the name of the street on the road sign. She needed to reconfirm it. The military portable device pulled up the satellite map of Yeni City. This was the satellite map before the war. After the war, the satellite map was devastated, and it was difficult to distinguish which was which. Daxia quickly found the location they were going to pass through, and the cross-shaped needle pointed to the name of the location. Yi Qian took a closer look, and a smile appeared in her dark eyes, washed by the flames of war. "We can pass through here, and it's very safe." She placed the portable device in the middle, and the whole screen opened directly to zoom in on the specific location of the map. Although this street was bombed and is very close to the crossfire point, here, her slender fingers pointed to a pre-war building. The shell directly blew through here. We can pass through the entire building. The crossfire point is on our left, and we can use the building's wall as cover. We can directly reach Saya Street. If the route through the building is destroyed, then we can immediately withdraw, and from here. Her slender and fair finger pointed at the street not far from the building. We can also retreat from here and here. We can also avoid the crossfire and have more options. Passing through Saya Street is Bluebell's Park. Beyond Bluebell's Park is the outskirts of Yeni City, which is not far from our camp. More importantly, the illegal militants have surrounded our camp. If we really want to fight, we can kill them from behind and directly clear a path of blood. We can also get the soldiers in the camp to deliver the materials, and we can leave immediately. The timing is seamless. We can leave after the battle. Of course, if the camp is in a state of emergency, we can continue to stay after the battle until they retreat. Yi Qian was a commander to begin with. Her arrangements were based on the overall situation, and then she would be able to command the battle from all directions. With a cause, there would be a process. Throughout the process, every move would be considered one by one, and then the results, as well as the follow-up. As she spoke, Li Jinyan looked at the satellite map and combined it with the military map in his mind. He nodded and said, "Okay, we'll evacuate according to your plan." Chapter 42-78. All the members of the Storm Commandos nodded. They didn't raise any objections to Qin Yao's plan and didn't express any doubt throughout the whole process. Yang Heng, who had been watching silently, was stunned again. This was because he found that Yi Qian's words carried a lot of weight in this group of special forces. He could see the respect they had for Yi Qian from their eyes. In other words, Yi Qian had worked with them more than once. His ability was so outstanding that these special forces admired him very much. All of a sudden, Yang Heng had an illusion that the Yi Qian he knew and the Yi Qian in front of him were actually two different people. He had thought that the Yi Qian he knew was powerful enough. Now he realized that the Yi Qian he knew was far less powerful than the Yi Qian he knew now. He needed to get to know Yi Qian all over again. His understanding of her was not even the tip of the iceberg. Yang Heng couldn't help but think of his cousin, Song Jiqiu. Last time when he had gone to the National Science and Technology University of Science and Technology, he had talked with his cousin while walking on campus. Song Jiqiu had mentioned Yi Qian and said something that had touched him deeply at that time. He had asked his cousin how he got along with Yi Qian at that time. Song Jiqiu had said, "The power of a role model is that there is no pressure, only hard work. Knowing that you have such a powerful peer and still working so hard, you will feel ashamed of wasting your time. You will feel guilty for wasting even a second." He had also mentioned that, under the influence of Yi Qian, none of the 45 students in their class had slacked off for a moment. When it was time to play, they would play appropriately, but their studies and training would never be delayed. The power of a role model, Yi Qian, who could make an arrogant boy like his cousin submit to him, was indeed not even the tip of the iceberg. Although it was not, it was already shocking enough. Unknowingly, Yi Qian had gone further and further. The things that he had come into contact with and seen were far beyond his peers. He even dared to say that none of her classmates in middle school and high school had achieved what she had achieved today. In less than 3 or 4 years, Yi Qian had already far surpassed her former classmates who had started at the same level as her. Then, in a few years' time, how high would she reach? With this thought, Yang Heng's expression turned solemn. She was so focused on comparing other people with Yi Qian that she forgot about herself. To put it nicely, he was now a returnee who had returned from studying abroad. In reality, it was because his family felt that he was still young and could train in the army to suppress his impulsiveness before starting his own business. Now, he needed to properly plan himself. If this continued, the gap between him and Yi Qian would widen. Even the gap between him and his cousin would widen. No wonder his family said that his cousin seemed to have been reborn ever since he got into the military academy. Now, he finally knew why. Yi Qian, everything was because of her influence. In just a few minutes, Yang Heng felt as if he had been enlightened. In an instant, he had walked out of the maze. Even the look in his eyes had changed. Yang Heng was shocked. His senior, who also knew Yi Qian, was also shocked. She could even lead a group of Special Forces soldiers into battle. Junior Yi Qian, you're so amazing that your classmates probably don't know about it. Your instructor probably doesn't know about it. Your brigade leader probably doesn't know about it. The higher-ups probably don't know about it either. The senior pushed up his glasses and felt an inexplicable sense of joy. His seniors did not suddenly become enlightened like Yang Heng. They were in different fields and had different directions for development. They also had very clear plans for their own futures, unlike Yang Heng, who was somewhat vague about his future plans. Therefore, they were not affected by it and only felt honored. Chapter 4279. On the other hand, Commissioner Miao was very pleased to see the outstanding performance of the female students from his school. Not bad, not bad. They were good seedlings for military operations. Although he did not know how to command battles, to be able to get the approval of the captain of the Special Forces meant that they were really amazing. A strong country with strong technology and a strong army. He saw the future in this group of young people. He saw a strong army and a strong country in the future. The current generation of young people should be like this group of young people in front of him. They should not treat their youth as a fleeting moment. They should not look back when they were old and realize that they had achieved nothing other than living well. Since they were here, they should leave something for this world. They should not live in vain. Yi Qian did not know what Commissioner Miao, Yang Heng, and his seniors were thinking. After the retreat route was set, they immediately began to leave the warehouse. The 5 people who were rescued were each protected by 5 members. Yi Qian covered Yang Heng. Commissioner Miao was protected by De Xiao. The other 3 seniors were protected by De Il, De Whale, and De Squiddo. This time, even Commissioner Miao had a gun in his hand. It was not a rifle but a pistol for self-defense in times of danger. Of course, the water demons of the Storm Commandos did not wish for this to happen. Retreat. Following Demon King Li's order, 3 commandos took over the position of the 4 sentries outside and began to cover the retreat. In the middle were Yi Qian and the other 4. The last water demons to retreat cleaned up the traces left behind when they retreated. When they left, it was as if no one had ever been in the warehouse. When they came out of the warehouse and looked towards the horizon, they could see grayish-green smoke rising from the city. The sound of artillery fire and gunfire could still be heard. The battle had started at 4 in the morning, and there was no sign of it stopping at 7:30. The water demons of the Storm Commandos did not have time to care about the situation of the 2 sides. Although the redrawn retreat route was half an hour earlier than the original plan, no one dared to let down their guard. Their eyes were on the 6 directions, their ears were on the alert, and their muscles were ready for battle at any time. They bathed in the sunlight and began to pass through the smoke. Yi City in the daytime was much more dangerous than at night. Passing through the ruins of the city that had been ravaged by the flames of war, even if they took a second look, they would feel that there was a gun aiming at them in the places where the sunlight could not reach. Danger, darkness, and sorrow. This was Yi City in the daytime. The illegal armed men drove tanks through the heavily damaged streets. Hiding in the corners of the abandoned walls where the smell of smoke could still be smelled, they stared at the tanks that drove past them with vigilance. It was not until the ground could no longer feel the tremors caused by the chains of the tanks running over them that the hidden water ghosts slowly walked out. Go! With a low shout, countless figures rushed out from the ruins on both sides of the street and continued to evacuate. They could not directly pass through the streets because this was still the territory of the illegal armed forces. There were even more illegal armed forces stationed outside to defend against the government forces. They could not show themselves and could only carefully pass through the ruins. Yang Heng followed Yi Jian closely. Whatever she did, he would do the same. He followed her like a parrot and never acted recklessly. At this time, he would listen to Yi Jian's arrangements. The closer they got to the crossfire, the clearer the gunshots became. Yang Heng could not help but tighten his grip on the rifle in his hand. He was the only one with a rifle among the 5. Don't be afraid. Follow me. A cold and calm voice sounded. Just a few words had already exposed the uneasiness in his heart. He looked up and saw Yi Jian, who had been protecting him all this while, slightly arched her back, protecting him behind her like a shield. Her back was clearly slender, but it made him feel inexplicably at ease. Chapter 4280. Feeling a little embarrassed, Yang Heng couldn't help but reply, "I'm not scared. I'm just a little nervous." He replied in a low voice, trying his best to sound relaxed. Yi Qian couldn't help but chuckle when he heard that. He didn't point it out. Scout Sea Anemone reported excitedly, "Devil King, we can pass." When the news came, everyone's spirits were lifted. "Keep up! Keep up! Pay attention to the rear! Okay, assault team, get ready. Retreat." Through the earpiece, the team members whispered to each other. The water demons of the Storm Commandos, who were fighting overseas for the first time, passed through the battlefield and headed toward the peacekeeping camp. The artillery fire on the left side was extremely intense. No one knew which side fired a shell, but the explosion shook Yiqian's side. They had already entered the place where the illegal militants' forces were the most concentrated. The first to enter were the two scouts, Sea Anemone and Seaweed. Now, they were hiding in the building that they were about to pass and waiting for everyone to pass. On the dilapidated street, the illegal militants stared straight ahead. As long as there were government troops in front of them, they would immediately open fire until no one dared to approach. The water demons of the storm commandos stealthily passed through the group of buildings bit by bit, almost right under the enemy's nose. The whole process was very, very slow. They would hide for a while and then move again. When they reached the building that they were about to pass through, everyone, including Yi Qian and Li Jinyan, were sweating profusely. This was the rear camp of the illegal militants. As they were guarding the front, they didn't pay much attention to the rear. That was why they gave the water demons a chance to sneak through slowly. The rear was guarded by the rebel general, Alva. No wonder these people were so relaxed. At this moment they held their breath. They gently exhaled, then slowly inhaled. The smoke in the air entered their lungs, and they had to endure it no matter how much it choked their throat. "Step on my shoulders and climb over." When they came to the bottom of a broken wall that had been swept by artillery shells and bullets, Yi Qian supported himself with one hand on the wall and bent his back. He said to Yang Heng beside him, "Go over quickly." To avoid the illegal armed forces that could start a war with the government forces at any time, they chose to move forward through the ruins. Now that they had reached a building where they had to climb over the broken walls, the water ghosts and Yi Qian could easily climb over, but Yang Heng, Commissioner Miao, and the three senior brothers could not. Left with no other choice, Yang Heng gritted his teeth and finally took a step forward. He had no other choice, and time did not allow him to make a choice. He could only step on her shoulders to climb up. Just as Yang Heng climbed up the wall, before he was ready to jump down, his leg was grabbed by someone, and he instantly flipped down from the 2.6-meter-high wall. He had to bite his tongue to prevent himself from screaming. At this moment, Yi Qian had already hidden himself. Big Eel, who was guarding the surroundings, alerted them that there were people, and the water ghosts who had not yet passed by quickly hid themselves. Yi Qian's entire body tensed up as he listened to the sound of footsteps. Even his heartbeat became lighter, and he did not dare to beat too fast. This time, the movement was a little loud. Big Eel, who was in charge of guarding the area, cursed under his breath. He probably had something else to say, but he suddenly stopped, cleared his throat, and said, "A few guys have come in. We have to kill them. Qing Miao, the people around you have passed by, so we have to go over and take care of them. They are now sneaking their way over here." Just as he finished speaking, Big Eel's voice suddenly tensed up. "Damn it, they are preparing to lay down mines. I'm afraid the government forces are going to attack here." After he finished speaking, Sea Anemone, who was guarding the area in front of them, said sternly, "Damn it, hurry up and retreat. The government forces are mobile, and they are about 1 kilometer away from us. I'm afraid this will be their next crossfire." Chapter 4281. This was no F***king joke. Yi Qian couldn't wait any longer. She pressed down on her earpiece and said softly, "Big Eel, be my eyes. I'll take care of Bray. 5 in total. Damn it. You can't do it alone. Demon King. Support Qing Miao. I'll be your eyes." Commissioner Miao was the first to jump over the wall, and Yang Heng was the second. There were still 3 professors who hadn't reached in time. The water demon, protecting them, couldn't leave, so the Demon King in charge of bringing up the rear took over. After Big Eel finished speaking, Li Jinyan had already moved and was quickly approaching Yi Qian. "Qing Miao, left side, 4 o'clock. Ready. Demon King, right side, 9 o'clock. Ready. Damn it, they're probably going to blow this place up. Cut off the government army's entrance here." Big Eel said fiercely. Once the entrance to the government army was blown up, not only would they have to take a detour, but they would also be caught in the crossfire and lose their lives at any time. Before the operation, they were already prepared to sacrifice themselves. Soldiers, going to the battlefield was like going to a tiger's den. Even if they knew there were tigers on the mountain, they would still go to the tiger's den. If they really died, they would have no regret. But Commissioner Meow and the others couldn't. They had to protect Commissioner Meow and the others. Yang Heng had already realized that something was wrong. He wanted to ask the Special Forces soldier beside him if something had happened, but the other party had already said, "Translator, no matter what happens later, you have to stay with Commissioner Meow. We're going out, so take good care of Commissioner Meow. Even though you're a civilian, I believe you can do it. Just like how you stood up to face the illegal militants," Big Eel said softly. His arm muscles were tense because of the sudden incident, and even the lines on his face were as sharp as a knife. Yang Hing pursed his lips and then nodded heavily. Definitely. He was a civilian, but he was also a soldier. Before coming to Libya, he had already told the political commissar that he wouldn't regret coming. He wouldn't regret coming. If he really died, he would still be a martyr. The People's Hero Memorial Tablet would also have a wisp of his heroic soul imprinted on it. Yi Jian had already taken action. Crouching, she rushed out like a cannonball before the other party could get close to her. With the boom of gunfire not far from her left as a cover, she pinned down the illegal armed man who had not started laying mines and had all the tools in his hands. Then, she raised her combat dagger and slashed down. Pfff, blood gushed out like rain, splattering onto the ash-colored gravel. Specks of blood blossomed, dark red in color. Li Jinyan eliminated a target at the same speed as he took down the person and dragged him away. 3 more to go. The government troops were getting closer and closer. High Anemone's face was dripping with sweat. "Brothers, let's try our best to get through. Haizeo, come and help Commissioner Meow and the interpreter. I'll send them over now." Big Eel took over and brought Commissioner Meow and Yang Heng closer. If something really happened, he would definitely stay and fight side by side with Captain Demon King. The 2 scouts immediately understood what the Great Mermaid meant. They held the anti-tank mines in their hand. Currently, landmines were banned internationally to prevent them from harming civilians. However, there were still more than 10 countries that had not signed this agreement. Libya, however, had signed it. The illegal militants who did not follow the rules in the first place continued to use them. This was because the Chinese peacekeeping forces were also responsible for demoning, especially the places where the illegal militants had stayed. They had to demine countless times to ensure that there were no problems. Internationally banned high-risk mines were still used by the illegal militant. This was also why Big Eel was instantly enraged when he saw it. Chapter 4282. Laying mines was absolutely not allowed. Even if they were on Libyan soil, even if the person who discovered the crime was a Chinese soldier, out of humanity and responsibility, they had to stop it. Out of the 5, 2 had been taken care of. There were still 3 to be dealt with. There are still 3 left. Qing Miao, find a place to hide. The target is coming. Big Eel's voice was so tense that it sounded like a straight line. He was very worried about his comrades. Sudden situations could easily expose their identities. Yi Qian exhaled softly. He placed the combat dagger in his hand horizontally and pressed it against his wrist. Hearing the sound of footsteps, he slowly squatted beside a piece of exposed, steel-reinforced wall. This could not even be considered a wall. It was just a piece of wall that had been peeled off by artillery fire. It was about 20 centimeters thick, barely enough for Yi Qian to hide. Where are they? Enoch, Nigel. The owner of the footsteps shouted loudly when he realized that his comrades who had entered the minefield earlier than him had disappeared. This was a place that they had occupied. Therefore, they were very vigilant and did not realize that there was danger around them. His shout was heard by the other two illegal militants. They were originally near Li Jinyan's side. Now that they heard the shout, they headed towards Yi Qian's side. Sweat soaked into Big Eel's eyes. The sun was getting hotter and hotter. His combat uniform was soaked in sweat and stuck to his skin. The heat was like a roasting fire. His Adam's apple was moving. His voice was so tense that it could break at any time. Qing Niao, there are two people approaching from behind. The target on the side was originally to be taken care of. Now, there were more people coming from behind. Yi Qian was about to be exposed. Big Eel's voice made everyone's breathing quicken. Big Eel's grip on Commissioner Miao's wrist suddenly tightened. His cheeks were as hard as rocks. The water ghosts all knew that Qing Niao was about to be exposed. Big Eel did not slow down. What he needed to do now was to escort Commissioner Miao and the translator Yang Heng away. He needed the seaweed to cover their escape. Soon, they would be able to leave very soon. He could already see the entrance of the building that had been blasted by artillery shells. There was plenty of sunlight at the entrance. That was the hope of leaving alive. And behind him, his comrades were in danger. The abyss was already staring at her, or perhaps waiting for her to jump into the abyss. Yi Qian, who was prepared to be exposed, adjusted his breathing once again. His elder brother's cold voice came through the earpiece. "I'm behind you. I'm here." Li Jinyan, who was a little far away, had already rushed over. One of the water ghosts who were protecting the three senior brothers took action. The Big Eel, who was watching closely, told him to support Qing Niao. The three armed men formed a triangle, and Yi Qian was hiding in the middle of the triangle. Yi Qian, who was in danger, pursed her lips. She knew that she could be exposed at any time, but there was no fear on her face. Listening to the voices of her comrades in the headset, she remained motionless and kept her eyes fixed on her initial target. In her heart, she calculated the distance and when she should make her move. As for the rear, she believed in her brother and her comrades. There was no need to be afraid. There was no need to panic. She just had to face it calmly. Big Eel, who was acting as the eyes, saw the Demon King approaching quickly. He saw his comrade, Big Prawn, rushing over to support Qing Niao, who was in danger. His eyes, which were red from sweat, stared even more intently. He did not even dare to blink, afraid that he would miss the most important information if he blinked. He had to watch closely and become the eyes of his comrades. Big Prawn 2 meters to the left. 4 meters to the third target. Demon King, continue forward. 5 meters to the second target. Qing Niao. They are less than 3 meters away. Chapter 4283. Yi Qian didn't say anything. She tapped her microphone to indicate that she was aware of the situation. The air seemed to have turned heavy. As the footsteps got closer, Yi Qian's gaze turned colder. Just a little longer. Just a little longer and I'll be able to make my move. 1, 2, 3. The figure of the approaching figure had already shrouded Yi Qian. He seemed to have noticed someone lying on the ground below the broken wall. His footsteps paused for a few seconds. The sunlight was too glaring. The blade of the combat dagger slashed across, and a blinding light suddenly shot out from the mirror-like surface of the sun. The light flashed past, and the scorching air was instantly filled with the smell of blood. Yi Qian panted and stabbed his dagger into his target's neck. Ugh, ugh, the man's throat was bubbling with water. His legs kept kicking, and the gravel rubbed against the ground, creating a loud clattering sound. The dagger that was stuck in his neck turned half a circle, and the sharp blade cut through his throat, trachea, and esophagus. The footsteps behind him were hurried. Yi Qian didn't even pull out his dagger. He threw himself forward, and his cat-like figure darted into a corner where the sunlight couldn't reach. She didn't have time to deal with the target that had already been taken care of. She only had time to finish him off. Blood flowed down the broken rocks that had turned white from the sun's rays. It added a layer of color to the exposed brown bricks. The two illegal militants who ran over discovered their comrade on the ground and saw the thing stuck in his neck. They were shocked, but they reacted quickly. They raised the rifles in their hands to the sky and prepared to fire to alert their comrades nearby. Two black figures rushed out, and like bullets fired from a gun barrel, they hit their targets accurately. Li Jinyan and Daxia each subdued one of them. Retreat! Big Eel, who was acting as their eyes, finally had the time to raise his hand to wipe away his sweat. The three senior brothers who were listening to the commotion didn't wait for their junior sister to wake up. With the help of two male Special Forces soldiers, they climbed over the 2.6-meter-tall wall. There were water ghosts waiting for them behind the wall. When he jumped down, a senior brother's glasses fell off with a "pa" sound, and the lens of his left eye shattered on the spot. Yi Qian, who had retrieved her combat dagger, dashed over. She drew her dagger quickly and fiercely. The enemy's blood splattered on her body and face. She ran over with a murderous aura and stepped on the back of her bent comrade as fast as she could. With a leap and a kick, she grabbed onto the broken wall tightly with both hands. It took her less than 5 seconds to reach the top of the wall. Come up! Clinging to the top of the wall, Yi Qian reached out his hand to his comrades below. With another run-up, he pushed himself up the wall. A pair of tanned and strong hands grabbed Yi Qian's hand and borrowed Yi Qian's strength to climb over the wall. We'll do it. You go down and protect them. The water ghosts who were protecting the three senior brothers had already come up. Only the Devil King and Daxia hadn't arrived yet. Yi Qian didn't decline. She said, "Okay," and quickly climbed over the wall. Then, like a swallow, she jumped down from the 2.6-meter-tall wall. Her feet touched the ground, and there was only a thin layer of dust. Then, after 2 consecutive flips, her figure was nowhere to be seen. The 2 senior brothers who were watching nervously. This is the legendary Qin Gong, right? Jumping down from 2.6 meter tall was so easy. It was like jumping for fun. After Yi Qian jumped down, she even helped one of the senior brothers pick up his glasses. Li Jinyan was the last to jump over. Big Eel, retreat. Following Li Jinyan's order, Big Eel, who was observing from a high vantage point, also retreated. Chapter 4284. Following Big Eel's retreat, everyone finally relaxed. Although Commissioner Miao and the others did not know what had happened, they understood why they had to retreat in such a hurry. Seeing Yi Qian coming over, Commissioner Miao gently closed his eyes, feeling as if a heavy stone had been lifted from his heart. Yang Heng's tensed back also relaxed. He held onto a dusty wall with one hand and remained silent for a while before he could take a steady step forward. Qing Niao Yi Qian even high-fived a few of his comrades to congratulate them. Just now, they had really escaped death. If they had fired a warning shot, everyone would have been in danger. Even if they wanted to escape, they would not be able to. Their battle uniforms were drenched in sweat, and water seemed to drip from them as they walked. They looked at their comrades who were slightly injured but were still alive, and they smiled at each other. Their dark faces contrasted with their snow-white teeth, making their smiles as bright as the sun. Not bad, Qing Niao, very steady. Big Mermaid approached Yi Qian and whispered with a smile, "You really don't want to consider joining our team? If you join us, you'll be our team's treasure. Team treasure. Or even national treasure." Yi Qian did not answer. He only smiled at Big Mermaid. After so long, she still did not forget to poach him. The government troops had already gathered and launched a new round of attacks on the illegal militants. Artillery fire filled the sky and smoke billowed. Yi Qian and his group of 20 people were struggling to move forward. If they were not careful, they would fall into the abyss and lose their lives. They had entered the most dangerous moment. No one said anything more. Cover, retreat, hide. These were the words they talked about the most along the way. Commissioner Miao and the 3 students were not taken care of by the Special Forces soldiers who rescued them. At this time, it was best to take care of themselves and not cause trouble for them. As for Yang Heng, he had taken on some responsibility from the moment he held the rifle. He felt that he had to shoulder it. After all, he was a soldier. Even if his position was a civilian, he was still a soldier. He did not follow the other water ghost. He only followed Yi Qian and followed him closely. Whatever Yi Qian told him to do, he would do it immediately. At this moment, his friends who had once been sitting at the same table as him became his protective umbrella. They protected him all the way back to the campsite. After passing through the bumpy Saya Street, and then passing through the Bluebells Park, which had been damaged by artillery fire, the scenery was gone, revealing the dark brown soil everywhere. Behind them, artillery fire filled the sky, and the government troops sent out tanks. From the fact that the illegal militants had deployed anti-tank mines in advance, it could be seen that there were still people like the rebel Arwa in the government army. The king of land warfare, tanks fired directly. The strong fire attack instantly destroyed the illegal militants' fortifications. In order to annihilate the illegal militants in the city of Yeni, the strong fire attack tanks also increased the support firepower. They were equipped with short 76mm howitzers. When the howitzers were fired, the buildings that were hit collapsed. Countless illegal militants were directly blown to pieces by the artillery fire. Broken limbs and bodies were scattered all around. Blood was instantly scorched into a dark brown color by the heat of the cannon fire. The lucky survivors dragged their broken bodies and screamed in pain. One of the illegal militants' body was directly blown into 2. He didn't die immediately. Instead, he watched as his lower body was blown away. He just stared with his eyes wide open and died in pain. This place had become hell on earth. I need backup. Now I need backup. They have already concentrated their firepower on the attack. The heavy weapons I brought out can't meet the needs at all. Chapter 4285. Inside the train station, the rebel General Alva was yelling at the top of his lungs. The situation at the front was dire. The government troops had mobilized their forces to launch a direct assault. He had a feeling that he wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Soon, news of an even more tragic battle spread. Saya Street had fallen. Tanks had passed through the buildings and the howitzers had left bloody gashes. Where are the mines? Damn it! Where did they plant the mines? Alva wasn't just roaring. His eyes were ferocious and his neck was swollen. No one knew why the anti-tank mines didn't detonate. No one knew that the 5 people who planted the mines had been secretly killed. The sun was getting brighter. Walking under the sun was like walking into a furnace. Their clothes were wet and dry, leaving white salt stains on them. At this time, Yi Qian and the others had already passed through Bluebells Park. They were very close to the Chinese peacekeeping camp and had already reached the outskirts of Yeni City. It had been an hour and 15 minutes since they came out of the warehouse. They were 15 minutes ahead of the estimated time. According to the original plan, they would have to walk out of Bluebells Park within an hour and then rest for 10 minutes. But now they didn't even have a minute to rest. No one stopped and quickly headed for the Chinese peacekeeping camp. They were about 3 kilometers away from the camp when they heard gunshot. They came from the direction of the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Big Shrimp contacted the camp through the satellite phone. The person on the phone wasn't the platoon leader but a soldier. The soldier had been holding his gun and waiting for the call. As soon as Li Jinyan's identity was revealed, the soldier immediately reported the current situation at the camp. The camp has been attacked by illegal militants and artillery. 4 peacekeepers have been seriously injured. The camp is in an emergency. This was the latest news that Li Jinyan received from the peacekeeping camp. It was very urgent and they urgently needed help. When Commissioner Miao learned that the camp had been attacked, He was worried about the soldiers and anxious about the special materials that he had painstakingly refined. He hadn't had a good night's sleep since he was kidnapped and had been on foot for a long time. At this time, Commissioner Meow's stamina was obviously weak. He even felt that his body temperature was abnormally high. But he didn't say anything. He didn't even let the 3 disciples who were taking care of him say anything. He said softly to Li Jinyan, "We've slowed down your marching speed. We're only 3 kilometers away now. Hurry up. Don't waste any more time because of us. We won't go with you. If we go, we'll just be a burden and distract you. Let's find a place to hide first. We'll come back when it's over." Commissioner Meow was worried about that batch of special materials. Even if he lost his life, he had to protect that batch of materials. "Teacher." His decision made the expressions of the 3 PhD students change. The supervisor meant that he would rather sacrifice himself to protect the materials. Yi Qian's eyes darkened as he said in a low voice, "Teacher, we didn't save you to put you in danger again. Your safety is very important. This is our mission in Libya. Therefore, you have to follow us." The marching speed had to be increased, but Commissioner Meow and the others had to be protected. As such, the Storm Commandos were split into 2 groups. 4 water ghosts were left to protect Commissioner Meow, 3 students, and the translator, Yang Heng. The rest of them immediately provided support. This was the decision made by their captain, Demon King. No one objected. Yi Qian did not stay. When he did, Li Jinyan glanced at her. Seeing her nod slightly, he knew what she meant. Chapter 4286. She was a sniper. On the battlefield, a sniper could hold back 10,000 men. She had to follow them. Yang Heng looked at her back as she left. His eyes were so dark that they looked like a bottle of ink. His dark eyes were filled with deep worry. "You know Yi Qian, right? Don't worry. She's very powerful." High Anemone smiled and patted the translator who was clenching his fists. He was a handsome young man. Although he was a clerk, he was quite brave. "Let's go. We'll find a safe place and wait for them to come back." However, if he clenched his fists so tightly, he was worried that his knuckles would break. His voice was filled with laughter, and he did not sound worried at all. Yang Heng closed his eyes and chased after him. "Will they be okay?" The air was silent for a few seconds. High Anemone stared at Yang Heng for a few more seconds with a surprised expression. He felt that Yang Heng, a soldier, had asked a rather funny question. Then, Water Ghost, whose skin was tanned but whose eyes were extremely sharp, laughed. "Translator, who can guarantee that nothing will happen to them on the battlefield? We all want to come back alive and live well. Then, we will participate in the next mission. I don't know if anything will happen to them, but I know that they will not let anything happen to them." Strictly speaking, Yang Heng was still a recruit. He had joined the army in December last year. It had only been half a year since then. Although he had a high level of awareness, he was still a recruit and had not been involved in this kind of mission. In addition, he was very worried about Yi Qian. After High Anemone finished speaking, Yang Heng clenched his fists so tightly that his palms were bleeding. Yes, why did he ask such a stupid question? Would anything happen to them? Bullets had no eyes. They risked their lives. Who knew if anything would happen to them? In fact, everyone knew that something would happen, but they still went. Because someone had to face these dangers, someone had to fight against evil, someone had to sacrifice their lives for the sake of the country. How important was that batch of materials? It was so important that when they were kidnapped, Commissioner Meow had told him, "Little Yang, we would rather die than say what we do. Even if we die, we have to take the secrets with us. We are individuals now, but our secrets are our country." It was not just a matter of words to make a country strong and its people rich. Behind a strong country, there were piles of bones. Sea Anemone and the other 3 water ghosts brought Commissioner Meow to a safe place, while Li Jinyan and Yi Qian rushed back to the Chinese peacekeeping camp as fast as they could. They finally saw the red flag fluttering in the wind above the camp. The sounds of gunfire also entered everyone's ears. The leader of the Storm Commandos, Demon King, quickly adjusted himself and began to support the battle. A is the main entrance. It has the most firepower and has heavy machine guns. The crossfire between the two wings was weak. Qing Miao, you're in charge of taking out the heavy machine gunners and our brothers in the camp. You don't have an AMR, only a rifle. How confident are you? The effective range of a Type 95 automatic rifle was 400 meters. Yi Qian nodded and said, "Sure, leave it to me." She was a sniper. Heavy machine gunners and cannoneers were usually handled by snipers. The platoon leader of the camp already knew that the special forces sent by the country had come to support them. Faced with the attack of the illegal militants, the 40-year-old platoon leader calmly commanded the battle. At the same time, he had already transferred the special materials to the shower room in the camp. The kitchen and medical center were not suitable. Once the camp was taken, these two places would be the first to be looted. The shower room was much safer. Chapter 4287. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos had a map of Yeni City and several important strongholds, but they did not have a map of the peacekeeping camp. Sea Anemone and Seaweed had to scout the scene secretly while assigning tasks. Sea Anemone and Seaweed returned 10 minutes later and immediately hand-drew a map. Using this map as a reference, Li Jinyan ended the message from the camp and quickly arranged the battle arrangements and plans. Approach the battlefield from the side. We can hide through the depression in the battlefield and avoid the heavy machine gun fire. We can also attack from the side. Qing Miao can take out the heavy machine gunners, and we can suppress them with fire and attack directly. Attack from the side and split into 3 groups to cut off their retreat. Surround the target and don't let a single one of them escape. When he said the last sentence, Li Jinyan's cold eyes were filled with murderous intent. The entire battle deployment took 5 minutes. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos approached the enemy bit by bit, but they did not move immediately. They needed to wait for Yi Qian to move first before they could move. The sound of gunshots that reached their ears made the hearts of the water ghosts sink. It was the sound of heavy machine gun fire. The effective range of high-altitude shooting was 500 meters, and the firing rate in combat was 200 to 300 bullets per minute. The bullets were like water, and the bullet belt was zheng 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 as it was delivered. The bullets were da-da-da as they were fired, forming a powerful wind of firepower. Under the attack of overwhelming firepower, the barracks without heavy weapons had not been taken down. This showed the combat level of the peacekeepers. The illegal militants who wanted to attack the Chinese peacekeeping camp and teach the other countries' peacekeeping camps a lesson were getting anxious. They did not expect that after attacking continuously for almost 40 minutes, the heavy machine gun fire still had not taken down the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Their patience was running out. They thought they had picked the country with the weakest military power, but who knew it was so tenacious that it was beyond their imagination. But they had to take down the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Otherwise, they would not be able to intimidate the other countries, let alone the government forces. Amidst the sound of the heavy machine gun fire, the leader of the illegal militants who was in charge of attacking the Chinese peacekeeping camp shouted. Yi Qian could not hear what he was shouting, but he could not guess from the shape of his mouth. But one thing was for sure, it was definitely not something good. At this time, Yi Qian had already climbed up a tree that was unknown but could be seen from Libya. He used the leaves to hide himself. Although she was at a high point, her position was not the best shooting position. She was shooting at an angle because the machine gunner's position was higher than her current position. Furthermore, her current position was the highest point in the area. Due to the geography of the battlefield, she had no way of finding the best shooting position. She could only find the best position between the worst positions, a commanding point within the effective shooting range of a 95 rifle of 400 meters. Yi Qian had always been a one-man sniper. He did not need any spotter or the help of a laser rangefinder. The entire time, he calculated in his head and found the best position before setting up his sight. Yi Qian only took 3 minutes to calculate the angle between his position and the target, as well as the adjustment of the aiming gear. Due to the sunlight, the lens was covered with gauze to prevent the scope from reflecting light. Through the scope, she found the person in charge of this group of illegal militants, but she did not aim at him. Her attention was focused on the heavy machine gunner, aiming at his head. Chapter 4288. 1, 2, 3. Fire. Yi Qian's cold voice came through the earpiece. The primer of the Type 95 rifle was ignited by the impact of the firing pin. Unlike the high-altitude gunfire of the heavy machine gun, Yi Qian used single-shot shooting. As soon as she gave the order to fire, there was a bang. The heavy machine gunner was shot in the left side of his head. His body stood straight for a few seconds before he fell flat on top of the heavy machine gun. Yi Qian did not leave immediately. She aimed at the guy who had shouted at the heavy machine gunner earlier. Although she did not know what the guy had said, she could tell that he was very important. She did not care who he was. Since he had tried to push the dead heavy machine gunner away to take his place, he would be the second person she would kill. They did not notice the presence of a sniper and thought that the Chinese peacekeepers in the camp had shot the heavy machine gunner. It was not until Yi Qian opened fire again and Li Jinyan and the others attacked from the rear that the illegal militants closest to the heavy machine gun finally realized that there was a sniper. Snipers were the grim reaper of the battlefield. The existence of a sniper was a huge, visible, and extremely terrifying existence to their own side. Right now, Yi Qian was a terrifying existence to the illegal militants. They have a sniper. There's a sniper on our side. The illegal militants who had discovered the sniper started shouting. Some of them heard him, but some of them had already fallen under the bullets of the storm commandos. Their support. They're fighting from behind. Quick! Find the sniper. Hurry up and find the sniper. Desmond is dead. Desmond is dead. He was killed by a sniper. Desmond was the person in charge of the attack on the camp this time. He was also one of the masterminds. Someone suggested that they attack the Chinese peacekeepers in Libya since they were the weakest in the country. Desmond strongly agreed. At that time, he did not expect that he would end up dying under the bullets of a Chinese sniper. At that time, he even said arrogantly that if he had 100 people and a heavy machine gun, he could take down the Chinese camp in less than half an hour. That was what he said, and that was what he believed. He believed very confidently. Reality slapped him so hard that he didn't even have the chance to repent before he was taken away by the Grim Reaper. Desmond's death threw the illegal armed forces into chaos. Snipers, reinforcements, and the stubborn resistance of the Chinese peacekeepers caused a large number of these people, who had rushed over excitedly and thought that they would definitely be able to get some benefits, to instantly fall. Yi Qian continued to hide in the tree. Now, the advantage of being at a low altitude was here. Most people would think that a sniper would shoot from a high altitude. This was a fixed way of thinking, especially for those who did not understand sniping. The illegal militants knew there were snipers on the Chinese side, but they were all aiming for higher ground. Some of them were even trying to snatch the heavy machine gun. This time, Yi Qian, who had not left, was not aiming for people. Her goal was to turn the heavy machine gun into a useless gun that could no longer pose a threat. Yi Qian aimed at the receiver. When she heard the gunshots, she pursed her lips slightly. She lowered her eyes slightly and allowed her eyes to relax for a few seconds. Then, she took a deep breath and moved closer to the scope again. She was shooting from the side. From her position, the heavy machine gun was at an L angle. Moreover, it was at a high altitude. She could shoot from the side, but she could not shoot the receiver quickly enough. This was the problem that Yi Qian was facing. Chapter 4289. The receiver was the entrance to the heavy machine gun's ammunition chain. If this was destroyed, the entire heavy machine gun would become a decoration. There would be no way to transport the ammunition chain at high speed to complete the high-altitude shooting. The angle increased the difficulty of shooting. Yi Jian, who had readjusted, aimed again. The distance, the wind speed, the number of gears. Yi Jian had already begun to calculate quickly until the center of her eyes suddenly became fixed. Her finger pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! The third bullet rang out. The shot was completed from a low altitude to a high altitude. Bang! Bang! The receiver of the heavy machine gun was destroyed by a bullet. The spring and shaft of the receiver were so damaged that there was no way to repair them. Yi Qian had already jumped down from the tree. This time, she did not continue to hide in the tree. Her comrades had already rushed up, and now it was her turn. Yi Qian, who had rushed out like a monkey, said, "After you're done, bring the good stuff into the camp. I saw a few boxes of ammunition. There should be quite a lot of ammunition chains in there. Keep the guns and bullet. If there's any trouble in the future, at least there's a heavy weapon to hold the line." Only being equipped with a Type 95 rifle was a little too simple. It was fine if there were no heavy weapons, but why didn't they even have a grenade? She did not believe that the peacekeeping camps of the other countries did not have something more lethal. She, who was in charge of the right flank assault, spoke as she walked with her gun. This made the water ghosts, who had already charged in, relax for some reason. It was just a little, but they did not dare underestimate this group of people. Which countries were supporting the illegal armed forces in Libya and where their firearms came from. Actually, the various countries knew a little about it. But so what if they knew? There was no evidence. The firearms trade was free. So what if it was illegal? Since there was support behind them, the water ghosts could not be careless. They could not let others know why they were there or what they were going to do next. Everything was a secret operation. It was one level lower than top secret. The bullets whizzed past. Some of them accurately hit the vital points, some of them avoided the vital points and hit other parts of the body, while some of them flew off and landed somewhere else. The water ghosts of the storm commandos, who were fighting for the first time, were still in high spirits. The bullets flew in all directions, and the colors in their black eyes were frighteningly bright. The water ghosts that were attacking from the back had the upper hand. After the first round of attacks, they instantly took down the other party. What they wanted was to clear out the enemy in the first round, because the casualties in the first round were usually the heaviest. By the time the enemy reacted, the second round of cleansing would begin. The second round of elimination would lower the enemy's casualties and increase their own casualties. The risk of death would be greater than the first round. Big Eel, who was in charge of the assault on the right wing, suddenly felt as if his chest had been hit by a high-pressure heavy weapon. He fell backward uncontrollably. At that moment, the pain in his chest was so intense that he felt as if he had been run over by a car wheel. His heartbeat was out of order and his blood pressure soared. Even his vision turned black. He was hit by a bullet. The big eel, which was turning black in front of his eyes, was dragged by the back of his collar by his comrades, as if he was dragging a sandbag to a safe area. In the buzzing sound in his ears, he heard his comrades shouting anxiously, "Damn it! Say something!" Then, he felt as if his chest had been run over by a car. Just as he was about to grin and say something, he heard his comrade say fiercely, "F***CK, you're not dead. I'm not injured." Chapter 4290. Big Eel felt as if there was a kaleidoscope spinning in and out of his skull. Big Eel couldn't even focus his vision as he gasped for air. His brain, which had been knocked out by the heavy blow, finally regained some clarity. I'm not dead. The bulletproof vest protected me. He grinned until he saw his comrade fall to the ground. Sea Anemone, who had a hideous expression, couldn't help but curse under his breath. Damn it, you almost scared me to death. Take a breather. Big Eel was fine. The fighting water ghosts all heaved a sigh of relief. Their jaws tightened. You're still alive after being shot by a rifle. You're really lucky. Sea Anemone, whose eyes were red, wiped his sweat. He saw Yi Qian coming up with his two comrades in front of him. He took a deep breath and didn't say anything more to Big Eel. He rushed up again. He put his hand on his torn bulletproof vest, which still smelled of gunpowder, and began to check if his bones were injured. The bullet didn't penetrate his body, but the force of the bullet still hurt his ribs. It hurt even when he took a deep breath. He pressed his fingers gently and his face contorted. His breathing suddenly increased. Damn it, his bones weren't broken, but they were cracked. Fortunately, it was a rifle bullet. Fortunately, the shooting distance was very far. Otherwise, a rifle bullet would have hit him and he would have been seriously injured. Big Eel, who had been hit by a live bullet for the first time, still had lingering fears. Yi Qian took over Big Eel's position. She fired quickly and had a high hit rate. With her help and the support of the peacekeeping soldiers in the camp, the illegal militants on the right wing were all cleared out in 10 minutes. The blood of more than 20 people stained the yellow soil red. The right wing has been cleared out. The camp is responsible for the final cleanup. Yi Qian reported the latest news on their right wing. At the same time, she quickly moved towards the main camp's entrance. Big Eel, who wasn't even tied up, didn't mention his injuries. He only said, "I'm fine." He endured the pain of his broken bones and returned to the battle. Right, 2 o'clock support. Roger. Someone shouted and Yi Qian calmly responded. The peacekeeping soldiers in the barracks could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The injured soldiers also withdrew and hurriedly bandaged their wounds. The accompanying military doctors rushed into the emergency treatment. Every time they saw a wounded soldier being carried down, their faces would sink. A soldier had already been sacrificed, so they couldn't afford any more. Over the past few days, the peacekeepers stationed in Cowell Town and Jenny City had been sacrificed. This was the first time they had suffered any casualties since entering Libya. Li Jinyan's cold voice entered Yi Qian's ears. "Qing Niao, come closer to me. 50 meters to your left." Sea Anemone and Seaweed, cover the Qing Niao and continue to clear the 2 o'clock direction. Yes. 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 3 firm and powerful voices rang out. Yi Qian moved closer to Li Jinyan, while Sea Anemone and Seaweed covered Yi Qian as he left. Yi Qian, who had moved closer, didn't shoot anymore. She moved forward 30 meters as fast as she could, then crawled forward another 20 meters to reach the target. Li Jinyan looked at his sister, who was like a god of death on the battlefield. He narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "I'll attack with you. Quickly clear all the targets and send the items away. If this drags on, I'm afraid they'll have more support." "Okay. I have no problem." Yi Qian nodded. She was a sniper and assaulter in the Snowfield Brigade, so she was familiar with attacking. She wasn't afraid. Li Jinyan had asked Yi Qian to break through the encirclement with him because she had fought with live ammunition before. Her ability to fight was stronger than the water ghosts, who were fighting for the first time. This was an indisputable fact. Chapter 4291. Li Jinyan knew that Yi Qian had combat experience, but the water ghosts did not, so he was immediately opposed. De Shao was the first to object. He should be the one to attack. She's suitable. Her shooting speed is fast. You guys cover her. Li Jinyan did not agree. Yi Qian was the most suitable at this time. They had been exchanging fire for a long time, so they had to end it as soon as possible. The water ghost's opposition made Yi Qian smile. She bent down to change her magazine and said with a smile, "Brothers, it's up to you. The sooner we finish this, the sooner we can wrap up. Don't you feel hungry now? I'm already very, very hungry." Needless to say, he was really hungry. With her interruption, the water ghosts remembered that they had not eaten since yesterday afternoon. They had only drunk a few mouthfuls of water. Sea Anemone also smiled. Commissioner Meow and the rest should be even hungrier. The translator I returned to say that he was so hungry that he wanted to eat grass. At this time, Commissioner Meow, Yang Heng, and the 3 professors had already moved to a safe area. Commissioner Meow, who was originally protected by 4 water ghosts, strongly urged them to return to the camp as soon as possible to provide support. They could take care of themselves. It was impossible for all 4 water ghosts to return to the camp to provide support. In the end, 2 water ghosts were left behind. Sea Anemone and Big Squid returned to provide support. Sea Anemone had already attacked twice. When he returned, he even dragged Big Eel, whose chest had been hit by a bullet, to a safe area. Now that the right wing had been cleared, Sea Anemone was also approaching the main entrance. At the mention of hunger, he casually mentioned that Yang Heng had said that he was so hungry that he wanted to eat grass. In an instant, the tense atmosphere dissipated. Yi Qian, who had finished changing her magazine, smiled. Yang Heng was a very cheerful and humorous boy. In high school, he had attracted countless girls to have a crush on him. Eat grass was indeed his style. There's no need to eat grass. When the time comes, I'll eat a bowl of noodles. I should be able to drink 2 big bowls of noodles. Yi Qian, who was bent down, had already changed to a crawl position. He gave Li Jinyan, who had also finished changing his magazine, a look. The siblings nodded slightly and began their assault. "Cover, cover! Roger, Roger! Snip the minions around us. Be careful of them shooting. Roger, Roger!" With Yi Qian and Li Jinyan's assault, the water ghosts had to fire so many times that the barrels of the rifles on their shoulders burned their hands. Bang, 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 the gunshots were too intense. Bullets streaked across like rain, tearing through the air before ruthlessly shooting into the target's body. Blood flowed out and the person fell to the ground. Boom! The sound of a grenade exploding could be heard. Flames sprang up from the left flank and thick smoke spread out. This was the grenade that the illegal militants had thrown out earlier. It did not explode. When the water spirits in charge of the left flank saw the grenade, their first reaction was to scatter in all directions. Then, a few stray bullets hit the grenade. The sound of an explosion rang out, and shrapnel and soil flew in all directions. The explosion had already created a hole in the ground. The water ghosts who were doing the final cleanup didn't panic because of the explosion. They were only nervous and asked their brothers who were in charge of the cleanup on the left wing about the situation. Motherf *Ker, dud explosion. De Xiao, who had been buried in a layer of soil, returned to his comrades. At this moment, his eardrums were hurting terribly. It was as if his whole body was placed in a vacuum. As the air pressure dropped, the ringing in his ears made his voice tremble. "They're all fine." They dodged quickly. De Xiao looked at his arm that had been pierced by shrapnel. Gritting his teeth, he quickly took out a bandage and wrapped it. He didn't have time to deal with other things. He had to stop the bleeding first. Chapter 4292. Big Eel was the closest to the dud, and he was also the first to discover it. Among the 3 of them, he was the only one who was hit by shrapnel. The other 2 water ghosts had already gathered and were covering for Big Eel, who was treating his wounds. If the left wing was fine, then it was fine. Now, the main thing was that there were at least 20 targets that needed to be cleared out at the main camp gate. In the camp, the peacekeeping soldiers, whose pressure had dropped, went all out. Reinforcements were here and they couldn't put all the pressure on their brothers. This was great. The The 60 to 70 soldiers in the peacekeeping camp went all out, and the water ghosts of the storm commandos entered the final stage of the cleanup. There was no room for these illegal militants to be arrogant. The fierce battle that lasted for 2.5 hours ended with the victory of the Chinese side. The illegal militants were not from the army. In fact, they were all residents of Libya. Before the civil war broke out, they were all ordinary residents. When the civil war broke out, the entire Libya was divided into 3 waves. One wave of NRPL militants, one wave of government forces, and one wave of illegal militants. Everyone wanted to rule Libya, and no one was willing to submit to anyone. Today, they fought each other, and tomorrow, they would fight each other. It could be said that there were casualties every day. The smoke had not dissipated, and the ground was littered with scattered bullets. The peacekeeping soldiers began to clean up the scene. As Yi Qian said, the heavy machine gun was directly transported back to the camp. A few water ghosts who were injured by stray bullets went to treat their wounds. Yi Qian, who had specially watched the heavy machine gun being transported back to the camp, simply repaired the gun. The cooking team already knew that the brothers who came to support hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. They immediately set up the pot, cut the vegetables, and cooked noodles for the brothers. Yi Qian only had some minor injuries. She just needed to wipe, scrape, and disinfect them. She simply didn't go over. She had already removed the body of the heavy machine gun. Several seriously injured peacekeeping soldiers were still in emergency treatment. The military doctors were all involved in the rescue, and the treatment of minor injuries was handed over to the accompanying nurses. The water ghosts of the storm commandos didn't ask the nurses for help. They entered the aluminum room with a Red Cross sign and directly handed it over to their comrades. When the nurses saw this, they turned around and treated the wounds of the injured peacekeeping soldiers. Li Jinyan wasn't there. He took a few uninjured water ghosts, reloaded their ammunition, and drove to pick up Commissioner Miao and the others. By the time the cookery team served the piping hot noodles and fragrant stir-fried dishes, Yi Qian was still fixing her gun. The person who came looking for her was Sea Anemone, who had brought her gun in with her. Looking at the parts on the ground, Sea Anemone gulped and asked cautiously, "Qing Miao, after you dismantle it, can you put it back?" After looking for her for so long, she was actually quietly dismantling her gun. Yi Qian did not raise her head. Kneeling on one knee, she put the parts back together and said with a smile, "Of course. I'll put the gun back together the way it was dismantled." Beside her, a soldier who was in charge of the maintenance of firearms in the camp smiled and said, "She's very professional. She knew where to start the dismantling as soon as she went on stage. She even told me where to change." Sea Anemone's eyes widened. "You can even fix guns?" "Yes, a little. Why are you looking for me? Commissioner Miao and the others are back?" Yi Qian didn't see the shock in Sea Anemone's eyes. It wasn't a secret that she knew how to fix guns. Most of her comrades in the Snowfield Brigade knew about it, so it wasn't something worth keeping a secret. She was calm, but Sea Anemone was a little uneasy. "Excuse me, Qing Miao, is there anything you don't know? Aren't you hungry? Come, let's eat first. We'll come back after we're done." Looking at the parts of the heavy machine gun, Sea Anemone secretly rubbed her hands. It would be great if Qing Miao was added to their team. Chapter 4293. Yi Qian did not know that Sea Anemone was one of the people who wanted her to join the Storm Commandos. Yi Qian was not willing to stop what she was doing to eat, so she asked Sea Anemone to leave some food for her and wait for her to finish what she was doing. She was the one who dismantled the heavy machine gun, so she had to take responsibility for it. She was indeed hungry. Just as Yang Heng said, she was so hungry that she could even eat grass. At this time, it was already noon in Libya. Li Jinyan drove Commissioner Miao back to the camp in a truck. For safety reasons, Commissioner Miao did not sit in the front passenger seat. Instead, 2 water ghosts were in charge of driving, while the rest sat in the back of the truck. Yang Heng took the water bottle and drank half of it in one go. There was still a mouthful left before he could swallow it. A male soldier who came to pick them up smiled and said, "You must be very hungry. You didn't eat grass when you got back, but there are some vegetables." Cough, cough, cough. The water that he had not swallowed went into his throat, causing Yang Heng's face to turn red. After coughing for a while, he wiped the water from the corner of his mouth and said awkwardly, "Just kidding, just kidding. It was just a casual remark." Could it be that he knew everything? Daxia, who was speaking, guessed what he was thinking when he saw his expression. He laughed and said, "We were so hungry that we could eat grass. This grass is good and it's quite delicious." They ate a lot of grass during training. What could Yang Heng say? He could only laugh. Daxia saw his awkwardness and did not say anything else. Translators were shy and did not have a close relationship. Jokes should stop. Prawn didn't say anything else, which made Yang Heng feel relieved. When he was with the special forces, he was more or less restrained, unlike Yi Jian, who could get along well with them. At first glance, he could tell that their friendship was deep. Yi Qian. He did not know how she was doing. Yang Heng glanced at the captain of the special forces, who was sitting with Commissioner Miao. He hesitated for a while, bent over, and walked over with his hands on the shoulders of the 3 doctoral students. When he moved, Li Jinyan's gaze fell on him. When he saw this, he even reached out to pull him. The truck was shaking. Even when he moved over, his body still swayed. Yang Heng immediately held on tight and sat down steadily. He asked about Yi Qian. When Li Jinyan heard him mention Yi Qian's real name, his gaze became sharp for a few seconds. Yang Heng instantly felt that his gaze was like a scalpel that was about to cut him open from the inside out. Under such a pressuring gaze, Yang Heng said in a low voice, "We used to study in the same high school. My parents almost took her as their goddaughter, but Yi Qian didn't agree and my parents gave up." So that was the case. Although Li Jinyan's eyes were still cold, he retracted the sharpness in his eyes and said to Yang Heng, "She is fine. She is in the barracks now." He paused for a moment and then said, "Don't mention her when you go back." "Thank you. That's good. That's good." Yang Heng let out a sigh of relief. The heavy stone in his heart was finally lifted. He gently nodded. "I know. I won't tell anyone." They were silent for the rest of the journey. Yang Heng did not know how he fell asleep as he listened to the rumbling sound of the truck. The most beautiful coastline in Yenny City. The sky was washed by water, the sea was blue, and the waves were rolling in. A few seabirds brushed past the waves and quickly flapped their wings to fly high. In the distance, a transport plane was flying further and further away. Among the waves, there were several black lines chasing after 3 square objects floating on the sea in 2 directions. There was a tail behind them. It was the combat backpack that had been left behind. Chapter 4294. More than 10 Snowfield Brigade Special Forces had successfully landed from the transport aircraft. The weather was good, the sea was calm, and there was only a normal deviation from the landing point. In order to avoid being exposed, the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces were 5 nautical miles away from the coast. 5 nautical miles was about 9,400 meters, and the normal deviation was about 9,500 meters. If they were to swim, they would need 5 to 6 hours to reach the coast. Swimming was definitely not possible. They needed equipment. The square thing floating on the sea was an inflatable boat. It was similar to an escape ladder on an airplane. As long as they pulled it out, it would become an inflatable boat. The 3 groups of people quickly pulled the floating thing apart. The square thing instantly turned into an inflatable boat. They first put a comrade on it, then pulled everyone onto the inflatable boat. The 3 inflatable boats had 5 people on each boat. They then picked up the equipment and set off towards the coast in less than 10 minutes. Some of the equipment could not be opened, such as land communication equipment, GPS, and other electronic equipment. They took out the rifle from the waterproof cover and loaded the magazine. The basic equipment was complete. They took out the oil stick and painted their faces so that even their parents would not be able to recognize them. They even painted their lips. When they were done, their eyes were as sharp as arrows. With the inflatable boat, their speed was much faster. Yi Qian installed the heavy machine gun and handed it over to the soldiers in charge of maintaining the guns. Finally, they ate a bowl of noodles and stir-fried it, no more, no less. They really ate 2 big bowls. Xia Jinyuan led the troops ashore. Yi Qian and the others had already tied the special materials to their bodies and were ready to set off. We must bring them all back to China. We are waiting for them. We are just one step away from completing our mission. Before they left, Commissioner Miao, who could not accompany them, carefully reminded them that these special materials were more precious than his life. They must be protected well. The 50 kilograms were tied to the 16 Special Forces soldiers. They even gave up their backpacks and only wore their tactical vests, magazines, and guns. They were almost light. Li Jinyan wrapped the specially processed material tightly around his waist and said to Commissioner Miao, "Don't worry. We'll bring all 50 kilograms back to the country. Even if there's only one person left, we'll bring them back." Good, good, good. With tears in his eyes, Commissioner Miao raised his hand and gently patted the young soldier's shoulder. "This is our hope. We entrust our hope to you." This sentence was filled with the noble spirit of a scientist, Pan Guoqiang, who was fearless in sacrifice and disregarded his own life. This was another hope for the powerful military, as well as the hope of those scientists who had fallen asleep in their laboratories. Li Jin's team was afraid that it would affect their marching speed, so they firmly disagreed. Commissioner Miao, Commissioner Tao, the 3 doctoral students, and the translator, Yang Heng, saluted him. This was hope. He would definitely return home with hope. At 3:37 in the afternoon, the water ghosts of the storm commandos who had finished cleaning up the battlefield drove away. As they were leaving, Yi Qian turned around and looked deeply at Yang Heng. Yang Heng did not agree to come along. No matter how she tried to persuade him, he insisted on staying. He also told her why Libya was filled with enemies and why some ambitious Western countries had joined in. Because the country was weak. If a country was weak and passive, then it would be beaten. The Chinese side, which had been beaten before, could not repeat the same mistake. The law of the jungle, where the strong preyed on the weak, had never changed. Chapter 4295. Looking back at her old friend, Yi Qian saw him smiling and waving at her. She raised her hand and waved goodbye to him. "See you in China, Yang Heng," she said softly in her heart. Xia Jinyuan led the soldiers to the coast. The platoon leader of the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Yeni City did not see them off. He was so busy that he wished he could split into 3 people. There were things to deal with in the camp, such as the post-war cleanup, and some things to deal with in the mines located in the depths of the rainforest more than 100 kilometers away from the camp. After Li Jinyan and the others left, the captain was talking to the person in charge of the mine with a frown on his face. "That's tricky. We were attacked by the illegal militants for 2.5 hours today. The camp was injured and a peacekeeping soldier sacrificed himself." The captain's face darkened at the mention of the sacrifice. "I'll try my best to send a squad over. We have to prevent them from attacking the camp again." It was unknown what was said on the other end of the line, but the squadron leader smiled bitterly. 2 classes, no more. The special materials sent to the camp will be taken out this afternoon. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Okay, I'll send 2 squads over. You guys try to persuade them again. If they do it once, there will be a second time. Since the equipment is almost transferred, let's leave as soon as possible. The situation is tense, and we don't know how long the government army can hold on. We can't leave anyone in the mine, not even the guards." When the captain ended the call, he learned that the special forces had left. Commissioner Miao and Commissioner Tao insisted on staying in the camp. They could have left, but they knew that they could not keep up with the special forces' marching speed. If something happened, they would be implicated. No matter how they persuaded them, even if they contacted the country, the two commissioners refused to go with them. Even the 3 accompanying disciples insisted on staying. The reason was that they needed to take care of the 2 mentors. The captain sighed. The camp was safe for the time being, and they would protect the 2 commissioners with their lives. He had already applied to evacuate Jenny City, and it was up to the Libyan president to see if he would allow it. Today it was all thanks to these brothers. Otherwise, the entire camp would have become a slaughterhouse. If it were not for the importance of the materials, he really did not want to leave. At 4:00 in the afternoon, the illegal militants occupying Jenny City received reinforcements. Jenny City was in a state of emergency. At 5:00 in the afternoon, the government forces that were clearly on the verge of victory suffered yet another crushing defeat, and Jenny City was completely occupied by the illegal armed forces. The camp immediately notified the Chinese mining factory that was more than 100 kilometers away from the camp, asking the Chinese employees, who were still guarding the factory and transferring the equipment, to abandon the factory and leave. Since the start of the war in Jenny City at 4:00 in the afternoon yesterday, the Chinese government had issued a notice to evacuate all the Chinese employees in the mines immediately, not leaving a single one behind. There were more than 100 Chinese factories, and the person in charge immediately arranged for vehicles to evacuate the employees after receiving the notice. However, the employees with Libyan nationality were unwilling to leave. The Chinese company had invested a lot in the mine, and the Libyan employees were unwilling to leave. Even the person in charge had no way to leave. While transferring the employees who were willing to leave, he persuaded the Libyan employees who did not want to leave. He swore to God that once the mines started operating, he would immediately invite them back to work. He even printed out the agreement, but in the end it was to no avail. Until today there were still 64 Libyan employees who were unwilling to leave. The person in charge of the Chinese side had tried countless times to persuade them, but they still refused to let them leave. That was until the illegal militants rushed in and aimed their cold, black gun barrels at the workers. Chapter 4296. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the mine jointly developed by Chinese and Libyan enterprises was occupied by illegal militants. All the Chinese and Libyan employees who did not have time to evacuate were controlled by the illegal militants. There were 12 Chinese employees, one of whom was the main person in charge, 2 of whom were technicians, 9 of whom were staff who evacuated important equipment in the mine, and 64 Libyan employees. A total of 76 mine employees fell into the hands of the illegal militants. The city of Jenny fell, and the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Jenny was completely evacuated. The captain had lost contact with the mine. He had no way of contacting the person in charge of the mine who had been on the phone with him 2 hours ago. After failing to contact him several times, he had a strong sense of foreboding in his heart. Then he thought of the 2 squads he had sent to support, and the captain felt a little relieved. After ending the call with the person in charge of the mine, he immediately sent 2 squads to pick them up and drove directly. 2 hours had passed, and they should have arrived at the mine by now. Although he thought so, the captain was still worried. As he evacuated, he contacted the mine from time to time, but there was no news until 5:00. The evacuation of the Chinese camp was not very smooth either. Jenny had fallen, and the government forces could not take care of themselves. When they evacuated, the wounded were sent to the camp, which indirectly increased the difficulty of the evacuation of the camp. They received the evacuation notice from the president, but there was no way to evacuate. Report. The captain, who was so busy that he could not split himself, heard the report outside the door. He put down the microphone and said in a deep voice, "Please come in." He still did not get in touch with the mine. Things were getting more and more troublesome. A soldier wearing a helmet and holding a gun walked in to report the latest news. "Captain, another 12 injured civilians have been sent to the camp for treatment." "Okay, I got it. We'll take them in for the time being." The captain's expression became more and more solemn. More and more injured people were sent over. The United Nations Medical Center was full, and the injured civilians began to be sent to the peacekeeping camp medical center in the 3 countries in Libya for treatment. Now it was up to the United Nations. The captain, who did not have time to think about the situation of his brothers who had left, received a call from the Russian peacekeeping camp in Libya. Due to the tense situation, and because they learned that the Chinese peacekeeping camp was attacked by illegal militants, the Russian peacekeeping force sent a small team of 10 people to support the Chinese side and transferred some of the injured to the Russian peacekeeping camp. However, the captain smelled a trace of abnormality in the call with the Russian side. There were a total of 3 countries' peacekeeping forces in Yeni City: Russia, Britain, and China. Among the 3 countries, Russia and China often contacted each other and exchanged information. Britain rarely contacted each other, and would not easily exchange information unless it was necessary to carry out peacekeeping operations. Even though Russia and China had good relations with the 2 peacekeeping forces, they had never sent troops to support them. Now that they had suddenly sent out their troops, their intentions must be deep. He did not know how the brothers who had left were doing. Yeni City was in chaos, and he was afraid that they would not be able to move around. Furthermore, they had important materials with them. Only the Chinese camp were attacked were the illegal militants. The company leader's expression suddenly changed. Even his aura became cold and ruthless. He originally did not want to disturb the Brotherhood Company, who were leaving with the important materials, but now, he had no choice but to disturb them. He needed to know how they were doing and whether they had encountered any difficulties. Chapter 4297. Just as he had guessed, the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos were having a hard time moving around. Although the peacekeeping camp was in the suburbs of Yeni City, it was still part of the city. After more than 2 hours, they had only just left the city and entered the jurisdiction of Cowell Town. As long as everything is fine, get to Cowell Town as soon as possible. I just spoke to Lieutenant Colonel Fong in Cowell Town. The situation in the town is still stable. A large number of government troops are stationed there. It's relatively safe for you to enter Cowell Town. After half a day, the water demons, being safe and sound, became the best news that the company leader had received. As long as they were fine, as long as they were fine, as long as they were fine. If a batch of brothers could leave, then so be it. After ending the call, the captain's expression relaxed. If they were fine, then the special materials they had brought with them were also fine. Li Jinyan and the rest were not too sure about the situation in Yeni City. However, after ending the call with the captain, Li Jinyan's sharp senses picked up on the captain's unusual behavior. After thinking for a while, he immediately contacted the Chinese camp in Cowell Town. The illegal militants have enough troops. The government troops have lost the initiative. The entire city has fallen. You're lucky to have left early. Otherwise, you would have been trapped. The president has issued a notice for old Zhu and the rest to retreat as soon as possible. It's been more than an hour now, but old Zhu and the rest have not retreated. They are being held back by the wounded civilians who were sent over. Lieutenant Colonel Fong, who was stationed in the camp in Cowell Town, said solemnly, "I've sent a battalion over to provide support. I hope they can leave safely. Also, we've lost contact with the mine. There are more than 10 Chinese employees who stayed behind because the Libyan employees did not cooperate. We can't contact them now, and we don't know how they are doing. We're waiting for the 2 squads that old Zhu sent out to report back." Lieutenant Colonel Feng did not know that Lieutenant Colonel Zhu had not informed him of the current situation. He thought that the brothers who came to provide support would know. Seeing that Li Jinyan had specifically come to ask about the situation in Jenny City, he told Li Jinyan the most serious problem at the moment. "In the end," he said, "the United Nations has called for an emergency meeting and sent members of the United Nations to negotiate with the leader of the illegal militants in Libya to stop the war. This was a domestic matter in Libya, and all peacekeeping forces were strictly neutral in their operations. They did not interfere with the internal affairs of the countries they were stationed in, and they were not biased toward any side in the conflict. Therefore, even if the illegal militants were to run amok in Jenny City, the peacekeeping forces had no right to interfere. They could only send people to mediate. The illegal militants also took advantage of this fact, which was why they rarely opened fire on the peacekeeping troop. Today, they opened fire on the Chinese peacekeeping camp. In the end, they learned a terrible lesson. The 100 troops they sent were all eliminated by the Chinese side. When the representatives of the United Nations were negotiating with the illegal militants, the other party deliberately hid this matter and did not mention that they had opened fire on the Chinese peacekeeping camp. Then, a new force was mobilized and sent to the Chinese camp. We received news that there are things in the 2 Chinese camps in Libya that are more valuable than gold. If we find them, someone is willing to buy them at a high price and provide a batch of elite military equipment, including heavy weapons. This was the offer made by the other party, and it was quite tempting. The leader of the illegal militants accepted the negotiation with the representatives of the United Nations while secretly sending troops to the Chinese camp. The peacekeepers sent by Russia to support the Chinese camp had arrived. Without any rest, they immediately transferred some of the wounded out of the Chinese camp, including 4 seriously injured Chinese peacekeepers who had been rescued. Chapter 4298. The soldiers sent by the Russian side could only communicate in English. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu's English was good, so he could communicate with them. As for the peacekeepers, they couldn't communicate too deeply. They could only communicate in simple daily language. Fortunately, they didn't need to communicate too deeply. Besides language, they could also communicate through hand gestures. This way, they could understand each other's intentions. The 4 peacekeepers who were pulled back from the brink of death were first carried into the vehicle. The Russians had considered everything and even sent an accompanying military doctor. The Chinese side also sent an accompanying military doctor and a nurse. As for the Libyan civilians sent to the Chinese military, the Russians also transferred some of them, but not all of them. There was no other way. The Russian medical center was also overcrowded. Soon, the vehicles sent by the Russians left with the wounded. The 10 Russian soldiers were all arranged under Lieutenant Colonel Zhu's arrangement. With the support of the Russian soldiers, even though there were only 10 of them, Lieutenant Colonel Zhu felt much lighter. The transfer of the 4 heavily injured peacekeepers made Lieutenant Colonel Zhu feel much more at ease. The illegal militants only targeted the Chinese peacekeepers. The reason for this was enough to make Lieutenant Colonel Zhu worried. Fortunately, the most important things had been transferred. If they were attacked again, they would fight to the death. When the Russian support arrived at the Chinese camp, the water demons, led by Li Jinyan, knew how dangerous the Chinese camp was. In addition, they had lost contact with the mine. After ending the call, Li Jinyan was filled with killing intent. He didn't say a word for a long time. The other water demons were also silent. Next, they definitely couldn't leave like this. However, they had special materials that Guochang wanted. Should they enter? Or retreat? It was a dilemma. If we leave like this, more people will be sacrificed, Yi Qian said softly. His slender hands gripped the rifle so tightly that the green veins on the back of his hands could be clearly seen. Yi Qian, who looked calm on the surface, looked at the commander of the entire team. Now, they were waiting for the commander to make a decision. Yi Qian opened his mouth. The team members, who were originally looking down, looked at their captain in unison. The atmosphere was so quiet that it was stifling. Their mouths and noses seemed to be covered, making it especially difficult to breathe. It was suffocating. Qing Miao was right. If they left like this, more people would be sacrificed. Demon Kingly, who received the gazes of his team members, didn't change his expression. He was still as cold as before. He said to De Xia, "Contact the country." He was very calm, as if he could smoothly solve any difficult problem. Yes. De Xia nodded and immediately contacted the country. The situation in Yemen was tense, and the military had been paying close attention to it. Now, the Chinese side had sent 2 special forces to Yemen in secret. One of them was the ace of the special forces, and 15 of them were equivalent to the strength of a battalion. They would carry out the assassination operation and kill the leader. Contact the storm commandos and find out where they are right now. Contact the civil transport plane that arrived in Yani City this morning and ask it to return immediately to meet the storm commandos. Chapter 4299. Commander-in-Chief Xia gave the order and immediately contacted the Libyan Aviation Management Center and the Storm Commandos at the same time. Big Shrimp from the Storm Commandos looked at the code and said to Li Jinyan, "They're already here. There should be arrangement. 1. Immediately head to Cowell Town and find a landing spot for the civilian transport plane. 2. The materials will be sent back to China by the transport plane. 2 electromagnetism specialists, 3 doctoral students, and interpreters will accompany them. 3. The Chinese peacekeeping soldiers stationed in Cowell Town will send them back to China. The Storm Commandos will head to the mine to rescue the employees from the 2 countries. 4. The civilian transport plane will enter the airspace of Cowell Town in 1.5 hours. The Storm Commandos must find a landing spot within this hour and a half." This was the order given by the Navy commander to the Storm Commandos. Commander-in-Chief Xia was the Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Due to the different military branches, he could not give orders directly. The new orders and new arrangements lifted the spirits of the Storm Commandos. With that, the problem they were in was solved perfectly. The military portable received the satellite map of Jenny City and Cowell Town. Based on the satellite map and the information provided by the Libyan government, Li Jinyan found the most suitable landing spot as quickly as possible. Not the best, but the most suitable. This was because they needed to go to the mine to rescue the employees from the 2 countries. In order to shorten the travel time, they chose a suitable landing spot that was relatively close to the mine. At the same time, they also considered that Commissioner Miao and his group of 5 could reach the destination within 1.5 hours and successfully board the plane to return to China. 10 minutes later, the radar of the civil transport plane that returned to China according to the original plan was locked onto again. It completed a mid-air turn and flew to its destination. Lieutenant Colonel Fang of the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Cowell Town received the latest order and immediately sent a squad to a certain place in Cowell Town. The squad would escort the 2 commissioners and a batch of important materials back to China. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu also received the latest order and immediately arranged for a vehicle to escort Commissioner Miao and his group of 5 to their destination. "We don't need to go to the mine for the time being. The higher-ups have made arrangements." In a corner of Jenny City, K7, who was wearing a military uniform of a different brand, said to Xia Jinyuan, who was also wearing a military uniform of a different brand, "Let's get rid of the cancer here. If the matter over there is still not settled, it won't be too late to go over and provide support." Xia Jinyuan stood in a dark corner where the sunlight could not reach. His tall and slender body leaned casually against the wall. When he heard the question, he asked calmly, "Did he say which Brotherhood company it was?" "No, I only said that he's strong." K7 shook his head. He squinted his eyes and said with interest, "Could it be one of our comrades? Has his head been kicked by a donkey?" Xia Jinyuan glanced at K7. The words that came out of his thin lips made K7's heart ache. "Do you think the military is too expensive? They even came in 2 batches? F***CK. You're the captain, you're smart." K7 shut up. A few of the team members who heard the conversation silently curled their lip. Yes, he wasn't wrong. His head had indeed been kicked by a donkey. A black shadow flashed in, followed by another black shadow. Xia Jinyuan, who was in the dark, looked lazy and casual a second ago. But in the next second, his eyes were cold, like a ferocious beast that had just awakened. "We've found the nest." The first sentence that came out of the black shadow's mouth made the team members, who were waiting for the news, stand up one by one and stare at the black shadow. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.